Just waiting for confirmation. Okay, Leader, I can confirm that the live stream.
Good morning. Welcome to this virtual meeting of Cornwall Council's Cabinet. Before consideration of today's business, I'll outline the protocols for today's meeting. So one of those protocols, colleagues, is just to have your camera on if you're speaking. Thank you. Today's meeting has been live streamed to the public via Microsoft Teams and is also being recorded. When members are speaking, they may choose to use their video. If the Council's live stream fails during the meeting and we cannot share the proceedings, I'll adjourn the meeting so that access can be restored. If the issue cannot be resolved, I will halt the meeting and the remaining business will be concluded at a future date. If a member experiences a technical issue, I'll adjourn for a short period to try and re-establish their connection. As I call members to speak, I'll remind you to switch on your microphone. If for some reason you cannot be heard, the Democratic Services Officer will advise you. Votes will be taken by a roll call and the result announced by the Democratic Services Officer. Where a member has declared a non-registrable interest, a disclosable pecuniary interest, or an interest by virtue of any trade union membership in a matter, they must leave the virtual meeting. Their departure will be confirmed and they will be invited to rejoin the meeting at the appropriate time. To confirm the procedure for today's meeting is that Cabinet members who wish to speak on an item should indicate by using the raise your hand function. Any members not on Cabinet who wish to speak should indicate by typing X in the chat box. Thank you, colleagues. Democratic Services Officer, if you'd like to continue, please.
Thank you, Leader. I will now call each member's name. Please confirm your name and electoral division. Councillor Jeff Brown, portfolio holder for transport.
Good morning. Yeah, Councillor Jeff Brown, I represent Newquay Central.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Dwelly, portfolio holder for culture, economy and planning.
Yes, hello everyone. Tim Dwelly, Cornwall Councillor for Penzance East.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Ethon Gibbons, portfolio holder for customers.
Good morning, Mike Ethon Gibbons, representing Laddock, St Clement and St Erme.
Thank you. Councillor Julian German, leader of the council.
Hello, Julian German, Councillor for the Roseland Electoral Division.
Thank you. Councillor Edwina Hannaford, portfolio holder for climate change and neighbourhoods.
Good morning, Edwina Hannaford, local divisional member for Lou West, Llansallas and Llanteglos.
Thank you. Councillor Sally Hawken, portfolio holder for children, wellbeing and public health.
Morning, Sally Hawken, Liscard East.
Thank you. Councillor Andrew Mitchell, portfolio holder for homes.
Mittendar, good morning. Andrew Mitchell, representing St Ives West.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Nolan, portfolio holder for environment and public protection.
Good morning, Rob Nolan, Truro Redanic.
Thank you. Councillor Adam Painter, deputy leader of the council and portfolio holder for resources.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Adam Painter, Launceston North and North Petherwin.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Rob Rothschild, portfolio holder for adults.
Good morning, Councillor Rob Rothschild, representing Camelford.
Thank you. I confirm all members are present. I can also confirm the following officers are present. Ms Kate Canally, Chief Executive, Ms Tracy Langley, Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer, Mr Phil Mason, Strategic Director for Economic Growth and Development, Ms Helen Charlesworth May, Joint Accountable Officer for Public Health and Care, Cornwall Council and NHS Kernow, Mr Ben Davies, Service Director for Children and Families, Ms Hosking, Strategic Director for Neighbourhoods, and Ms Melanie O'Sullivan, Monitoring Officer. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And to be clear, colleagues, and for anyone watching the webcast, item 11, PIDAR regeneration, following the decision of the Strategic Planning Committee, I've decided to withdraw the Cabinet report in respect of the PIDAR redevelopment. This matter will not therefore be discussed at today's meeting. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Democratic Services Officer, please.
There are no apologies for absence. Thank you.
Thank you. And declarations of interests, colleague. no declarations of interest, in which case we'll move on to agenda item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of December 2020. Cabinet colleagues, for accuracy, any comments on accuracy? In which case I'll move the minutes and Councillor Painter will second. Democratic Services Officer, if we can move to the vote, please.
Certainly, thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mikey Thorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And finally, Councillor Rob Rochell.
For.
Thank you. I confirm all members have voted unanimously for the minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on then to agenda item number 4, the leaders' announcements. Colleagues, Cornwall Council continues to work hard to support our residents through the pandemic. We have been living our values, listening to our residents and supporting our businesses, being responsive to both of their needs. Unfortunately, we all continue to be challenged by the pandemic. We are at a critical moment. Nearly half of those who have died from coronavirus in Cornwall have done so since the 1st of January. We must redouble our efforts and do all we can to work together to follow the public health guidance and keep people safe. Democratic Services Officer, I think you've still got your microphone on.
Thank you. I'm so sorry.
No worries, thank you. With that in mind, can I please urge everyone not to relax their guard during half term next week. Case numbers may be coming down, but are still higher than the earlier peaks, and we know the new variant of the virus spreads more easily. Please keep following the public health guidance and only go out for work, essential journeys and exercise. My sincere condolences to all of those who have lost loved ones during the pandemic, and my grateful thanks to everyone who in so many different ways are making a positive difference in their communities. As we're all aware, the pandemic has had a huge effect on our economy, more so in Cornwall because of our reliance on hospitality, the visitor economy and those industries which support them. Cornwall Council is continuing to get money out to businesses eligible for local restriction support grant and closed business lockdown payments as quickly as we can, ensuring that all those eligible receive the funding due to them. We are grateful for the funding from government to pay these grants. In relation to the additional restrictions grants, however, we simply do not have the money to support businesses to the level needed. We are currently working as quickly as possible to process thousands of applications we have received for the additional restrictions grant, which is aimed at businesses who are unable to access the mandatory grant schemes already in place. For this stream of business funding, we are clear that more money is needed, and we have made the case to Rishi Sunak MP, the Chancellor, for further funding. We have done this alongside the Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Local Enterprise Partnership, Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, Cornwall Marine Network, Cornwall Manufacturers Group, the Federation of Small Businesses, Safe West Improvement Districts and Visit Cornwall. Cornwall Council will continue to stand up for the businesses of Cornwall. On our agenda today are many important items culminating in the business plan and budget. The business plan shows how we are living our values and what our aims are for the future. The budget shows how we are going to deliver these. Of particular importance is adult social care and how we support those in need of its services. For many years, government have promised a sustainable funding solution, but instead, government are forcing councils into council tax rises. I hear the recommendations from our Health and Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee and today have written to the Secretary of State, Matt Hancock MP, calling on government to bring forward a long-term sustainable funding package for social care in the March budget and honour the Prime Minister's pledge to fix social care once and for all. Last week I gave evidence to the House of Commons Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee as part of their inquiry into devolution. I attended the meeting both as leader of Cornwall Council and representative of Britain's leading edge. I spoke of the issues of disparity of wealth in the country, where London is by far the wealthiest region, not only in the country, but of Europe, while Cornwall is the poorest in Western Europe, and how this is not the case in countries with greater devolution, where there are powers to use local understanding to tackle systemic issues. I also explained how a clear majority of residents now believe too many decisions affecting us in Cornwall are made in Westminster, and these decisions should be made locally instead. It was a good session and allowed us to get our voice heard. I look forward to working further with those in Westminster to bring more power to Cornwall and to allow us to have the ability to shape our own future. On Thursday last week, I attended Cornwall's first Race Equality Forum, which I'm pleased to say was very well attended. The forum heard from the Black Asian Minority Ethnic Steering Group and the work that they had undertaken so far on developing a model for Cornwall. This was followed by guest speaker Councillor Asher Craig, Bristol's Deputy Mayor, on the work that they have done so far on tackling racism. Her words inspired and motivated the group, who were all very keen to move forward on making Cornwall more inclusive and anti-racist. All of these areas that I have just highlighted and the wide-ranging work covered on today's agenda all form part of what residents think about the council. In our resident survey released last week, residents' satisfaction with the way Cornwall Council runs things is above the local government average. And resident satisfaction with both the local area as a place to live and trust in Cornwall Council is significantly higher than the local government average. I'm so proud of how Cornwall Council and our communities have reacted to the challenge of the pandemic and the depth and breadth of work that Cornwall Council has continued to undertake to make Cornwall a cleaner, greener, fairer and more inclusive place to live. Thank you, everyone. Muraz Pabonen. So the next agenda item, number 5, is questions from the public. We have 2 questions from the public today. Thank you for your questions. The first public question is regarding secondary parish allocations in Section 106 legal agreements from Mr. A. Percy of Holywell Bay. Mr. Percy, are you with us to ask your question?
Yes, I am. Good morning.
Morning. If you'd like to continue, please.
In recent planning briefing papers to Cabinet members, why was it stated that the unique Section 106 affordable housing cascades for the latest Colan Parish housing estates were from the Restormal and Cornwall local plans and affordable housing and allocation DPDs, when no such cascades exist in these documents?
Thank you, Mr. Percy, for your question. Councillor Mitchell to respond, please.
Thank you, Leader. Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Percy, for your question. The approach that the Council and its predecessors took to the drafting of Section 106 agreements for affordable housing cascades followed the policies set out in their respective local plans, supplemented with advice set out in other relevant planning and housing guidance, alongside agreed Section 106 templates. All councils approach this differently in accordance with their own policies and priorities. Cornwall Council has provided consistency in the approach across Cornwall now through the framework created by the Cornwall Local Plan and the Housing Supplementary Planning document. In particular, defining local need is set out in paragraphs 54 to 62 of the Housing SPD. The Council has provided you with further clarification on the approach to defining local connection cascades in previous written correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Percy, would you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do. May I ask why you haven't answered the question?
Sure.
Sorry, Mr. Percy, I thought I had. I know you've raised this question on many times and received many replies, and you're obviously still not happy with those responses. So when allowed, I'm more than happy to come and physically meet you and the parish council if needs be, or we can try and do a Zoom meeting. I'd like for everybody's, particularly yours and the officers who are responding to your questions, to be able to get to the bottom of this, give you an answer that if it doesn't make you happy, at least explains the policies that we're relating to.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Percy, for your questions. The second question is regarding the rum distillery planning application at United Downs, which is from Mr. C. Donathan of Caharrock. Mr. Donathan, if you'd like to ask your question, please.
Thank you, Leader. Can the portfolio holder provide an update on the current rum distillery planning application at United Downs?
Thank you. Councillor Dwelly to respond, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Donathorne. This application is currently being assessed by the Planning Service. There are, as I'm sure you will know, a number of very complex considerations, and the decision will not be made by the target date of 10th of February. Therefore, the timeframe has been extended in accordance with our normal procedures. The application is likely to be determined by the Planning Committee itself, but at this point in time we cannot confirm a date, I'm afraid. But you can track the progress of the application, and if you don't know it already, and anyone's listening, it's PA 20/09415 on the Council's online planning register. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. Mr. Donathorne, would you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Leader. In March 2019, Cornwall Council announced that the use of the land at United Downs would be subject to a complete tender process. Purple Cornwall Limited, the stock car promoters, won that tender process and were offered a 10-year lease, which they signed. Unfortunately, Cornwall Council stalled on the signing of that 10-year lease, and in March 2020, the offer of the lease was withdrawn. On January 21st of this year, Cornwall Council publicly stated, and I quote, "We're working with the company to help identify other suitable potential sites for their business after that date." So can the portfolio holder for planning please confirm three things? What specific potential sites have been identified for Purple Cornwall Limited? Which specific potential sites have been shared with Purple Cornwall Limited? And will these potential sites be exclusively from within Cornwall Council's own portfolio, or are they just going to direct them to a commercial estate agent? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jonathan. I appreciate the interrelationship between the two questions, but I'm not sure that it's supplementary and that it's not about the planning application. It's about the property matters within it. But Councillor Dwelly, would you like to respond, please?
Yes, well, Mr. Donathorne, as the leader says, it's not quite the same thing as what will happen on this particular site, and obviously there are competing views about what should happen on that site between a continuation of stock car racing versus use of geothermal power for a rum distillery. The planning process will determine what is appropriate there. I can give you this assurance that it was me that said that we would do all we can to help the stock car operators to find another site. I don't have details of specific sites for you. We've never said that we would guarantee to find that, but we will help. And I'm more than happy after this meeting to engage with you and to put you and others in touch with the relevant people at the council who can give you a detailed answer on that. And certainly from my point of view, if the stock car racing is required to go somewhere else, then I will do all I can to help find it another site. And as for where that is, I think the most important thing is it's a good site, whether it's owned by us or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. Thank you, Mr. Jonathan, for your questions. So we're moving on then to agenda item number 6, the Environmental Growth Strategy 2021 refresh. Councillor Nolan to introduce, please.
Thank you, Leader. This year, as world leaders at the G7 seek to shape the recovery, the eyes of the world will be on us here in Cornwall. What better setting to keep the importance of nature front and centre? From Towans to Tors, marshland to moorland, and our iconic chough and Cornish hedges, nature is central to Cornwall's identity and heritage. In 2015, the 2015-65 Environmental Growth Strategy, led by Edwina, Councillor Hannaford, was a groundbreaking local strategy that outlined an ambition not just to conserve, but to grow nature in Cornwall. Amongst much else, 2020 was a cruel reminder of just how volatile our relationship with nature can be, and a timely prompt to get that relationship right. Emphasising the foundational role of nature to our health, prosperity, heritage and culture, the strategy laid a long-term vision for safeguarding and stewarding it, and a framework for responding to the ecological crisis. There is much to be proud of about what has been collectively achieved across Cornwall since then, thanks in part to the strong relationships through our local nature partnership and the enabling role we've played supporting inspirational community and business action. I was very pleased to participate near the end of last year in both the Local Nature Partnership Annual Conference and our Cornwall Sustainability Awards. Both evidence the inspirational community action on the ground, as well as how proud we can be of the role this council has played in enabling that through community grants and our business support initiative in partnership with the University of Exeter. And through schemes such as the Forest for Cornwall and our Making Space for Nature scheme, this council has certainly not shied away from significant action of its own. It is also wonderful how our pioneering concept of environmental growth has become deeply embedded, whether through our decision wheel at the heart of our local industrial strategy, in our local plan and emerging climate DPD and our county farm strategy. Such alignments put paid to temptations to evade action for nature by demonstrating its compatibility with broader objectives. We can also be proud that this work has got us noticed. This pioneering local action was recognised by government's request for us as one of only 5 areas in the country to pilot the creation of a nature recovery plan, one of George Eustace's flagship policies that is enabling us to help shape national policy. But there remains much to be done to face up to the scale of the ecological crisis. The evidence shows that wildlife globally, nationally and locally remains in decline, and that risks being worsened by climate change. This strategy remains a vital local framework to help us reverse that. 5 years from the original, this refresh provides a vital update to reflect changes to the strategic context locally and nationally, from our significant action through Carbon Neutral Cornwall to the Environment Bill and Agriculture and Fisheries Acts, and embedding green recovery ambitions endorsed by partners through the Leadership Board and Local Nature Partnership. This strategy also sets out in further detail how partners will work together to help deliver Cornwall's transition to sustainable food, land and seas as part of the shared vision, the Cornwall Plan 2020-50. A cleaner, greener Cornwall with more space for nature is at the heart of that vision's ambition to be leading in sustainable living for the well-being of future generations. And in a year that promises to be pivotal for nature, given the G7, the COP26 Climate Conference and the COP15 Biodiversity Conference, it is also a key opportunity to showcase the local ambition shown of this council, our communities and our businesses. I hope that Cabinet will join me in endorsing this refresh strategy as a vital, ambitious framework to steer us and our partners in our transition towards a green Cornwall. And I don't have the recommendation in front of me. Can I come back to reading out the recommendation after Councillor Hannaford has seconded, please?
Certainly, thank you. Councillor Hannaford, please, thank you.
Thank you, Leader.
You're on mute, Councillor Hannaford. Yep.
It's fantastic to see the work I began with the Local Nature Partnership way back in 2015 for the 2015-65 Environmental Growth Strategy evolve with this refresh. It's vital to reflect upon how much environmental growth has been embedded in our thinking since then, not least through our groundbreaking decision-making wheel. As Rob noted, action for nature remains critical, not just for facing up to the ecological crisis, but the climate crisis as well. So this strategy remains a vital sister to our climate change action plan. As the strategy says, tackling climate change means going beyond decarbonising energy. It's ensuring that we are harnessing the ability of nature to reduce the risks, draw down carbon and adapt. From woodland to soils to seagrass, the carbon sequestration potential of nature is a major contributor to how we will reach our net zero goals, whilst natural solutions are also a major component of how we can adapt to flood risks, for example. And I think the public understands this link very well. I recall that during our climate change engagement in 2019, planting trees was the most popular action on climate change that we heard during our local roadshows. Helping nature and wildlife to thrive was the most popular answer online. It's fantastic to therefore see the strategy highlight natural climate solutions as a central pillar and champion projects like the Forest for Cornwall. So alongside our climate change action plan, it lays a solid natural foundation for our transition to be net carbon, zero net carbon. I'm incredibly happy to second Rob's proposal, which I think he'll read out now.
I really won't. You still can't get to it.
I will do that, Councillor Nolan. Then it's just a brief recommendation to Council that the refreshed environmental growth strategy, as set out in Appendix 1 to the report, be approved. So that's the recommendation from Cabinet to Council on this item. Very good, thank you. Colleagues, Cabinet colleagues wanting to come in, hands up, the wider membership, X in the box, please. Anyone wanting to come in? Councillor Rule, Chair of the Relevant Scrutiny Committee, would you like to say a few words to this one?
Sorry, Leader. No, nothing to add to it. I think that the two Cabinet portfolio holders have really laid it all out very clearly, and it's been a very impressive piece of work right from the beginning. It's great that it's got to this stage now, so happy for you colleagues to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bastin, please.
Thank you, Leader. Much is made of making space for nature, but there is clearly a conflict between making space for humans, and I'm just wondering how we can sort of address that with Cornwall's escalating population, the need for housing, infrastructure, etc. It surely is going to clash with our cities' designs to leave sort of natural areas natural. Also, the actual footfall increase from this is going to put pressure on footpaths. It's going to put pressure on coastal footpaths, sand dunes, etc. So I wonder what may well be the thinking on addressing those, please.
Thank you. So no one else is indicating, so I'm going to let Councillor Nolan respond. If no one else has indicated, this is a very important item, but in view of the length of the agenda today, I'll draw a line if no one else has signalled to come in when Councillor Nolan has responded. Councillor Nolan, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Baston, for your question. Yes, indeed, there is a conflict with people and nature very often. But I think what I found quite inspirational with our Making Space for Nature team is the way they've gone into inner towns where we have housing estates developed with small green areas. Yet these green patches where we go and cut the grass 5 times a year are green deserts. Our team have gone in and transformed 33 of these so far into nature-rich environments, planting wildflowers, working with the community to do that so that they get a sense of ownership. So on one particular estate that I visited in Cambourne, the children who previously hadn't been able to even identify a wasp were out busy with their bug hotel and enjoying it. So they then were coexisting with nature. And to take Langgarth as a development that the council's putting forward, we're retaining the Cornish hedges, which are biodiversity corridors and fantastic things. As I never cease to repeat Will Coleman's statements, the oldest structures on the planet still in use for their original purpose, and we're retaining them where we can in Langgarth for nature, working with people and development.
Right,
but there are occasionally conflicts, I'll accept.
Sorry, could I just have one more thing, please, Leader? I'm interested in what you say with green spaces, but perhaps I'm sort of going on perhaps to item 7 really. Can we protect them from development within our sort of DPD sort of scenario really as well, do you think? I mean, because they certainly need protecting, but developers always have a greedy eye, should we call it?
Well,
Sebastian, perhaps a segue to the next item, but yeah. Nolan, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, in the refresh of the local plan as well, and the pilot we're doing with government, one of the things is biodiversity offset, which ran a red flag up with me. So the idea that you can develop on the edge of, say, a town, and any biodiversity that's lost will get put somewhere else. And I said, whoa, this has to be locally offset. You can't just take what bit of biodiversity exists on the edge of a large town and transplant it somewhere out into the countryside where they've already got biodiversity. It must be developed within the town. So local mitigation.
Right, excellent. Right, so thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And if you'd like to turn off your cameras, thank you. That's been proposed and seconded. So Democratic Services Officer, if we can move to the vote, please.
Lovely, thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please can vote whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Eathorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter. Councillor Painter, are you with us? Councillor Painter? I'll move on to Councillor Rob Rotchell.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Painter,
Apologies.
are you there? Oh, you're there. Brilliant.
Apologies. For.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I can confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so moving on then to the item that has already been highlighted, agenda item number 7, consultation on the Climate Emergency Development Plan document, stage 3. Councillor Dwelly to introduce, please.
Sorry, Leader, just clicking the right buttons. Yes, so what I'd like to say before I come to the recommendations is that, first of all, I want to really thank the officers who've worked on this. I won't name them all, but they know who they are. They've done an amazing piece of work here, really at good speed, but without rushing, getting a very detailed document pulled together with so much consultation and information coming in from people, and we really are in a good space now, because we're going to be consulting everyone yet again by going out to the public with this document, and that's what we're going to be voting on today. So everyone who's got an interest in this, not only have you already had a chance to comment, you're going to have another chance to comment before the final document. This is a planning document that's come from this council's signing of a climate emergency. We recognise and have stated there is a climate emergency, and this is an important document that will help us to tackle it. It's also, I think, the beginnings of what in the future are going to be the next local plan. We're starting to see a very different approach to planning in Cornwall that reflects this and reflects things like how we work and how we live after COVID. Some will ask, rightly, is this ambitious enough? There are, of course, two schools of thought here. I remember as a councillor, it wasn't that long ago, that quite a few councillors were absolutely against wind farms and solar panels. You don't hear that so much nowadays. So I don't think that we're going to be hearing an anti-emergency, anti-action response to this. But equally, there are people who are extremely passionate, for example, Extinction Rebellion and others, who think we haven't gone far enough. I feel, on balance, we've got the balance right here. I think what we're doing is we're going to be as ambitious as we possibly can, with the best chance that when this policy is reviewed by an inspector, that hopefully all of it will be adopted. And that will be a very, very ambitious planning document compared to many other parts of the country. What I'd like to do, please, for anyone with the papers, is refer you to page 83 of the Cabinet reports. And this is the beginning of the document, because it shows what we're doing as a council. This isn't just about having a planning policy for others to obey, if you like, or to follow. On that page, it says how Cornwall Council is helping to lead the way. And I'm delighted to emphasise and highlight that in our budget for the next 4 to 5 years, we are committing £175 million directly to low carbon and climate change investments. And there are many examples given there, which I'm sure you'll be interested in. But looking to the future and where we're going to be in Cornwall in a number of years, we're planning here for offshore wind to be a really significant thing that we can do from Cornwall, from our harbours and ports. We're going to have more and more electric cars. People are going to be used to driving electric cars. They're going to be used to charging them in car parks, including the ones we own. We're going to be promoting electric bikes as well, so people can go to work and go to shop without having to drive short distances with all the relevant pollution. We're looking towards people not having to buy petrol. One of the things people overlook is that when we are increasingly using public transport and electric cars, you save a lot of money. I know this, I've got an electric car and the family savings are huge, hundreds of pounds a month. So going green is not necessarily about pain, it can be about gain, and that's the thing I'm excited about. We're looking to encourage shared use of buildings rather than one organisation having one building and another having another. Can we combine use of buildings? It's much better for the environment if we do that. We're looking to better insulate homes, to retrofit. We're looking to make sure that new buildings, any buildings, are energy efficient, and that's part of this document. And we're just generally going to be commuting less and doing what we're doing today a bit more. Not all the time, we will still be meeting people after COVID, but this technology we're all on today is a sign that we can avoid unnecessary driving of our cars up and down the A30, especially with those that are petrol. So I think it's a positive message here, and I'm absolutely delighted to recommend it to Cabinet, and I will now read out the recommendations. Firstly, that the Climate Emergency Development Plan document be approved for public consultation under Regulation 19, that's pre-submission. Secondly, that authority be delegated to the Service Director for Planning and Sustainable Development in consultation with the portfolio holder for Culture, Economy and Planning to make minor amendments to the document as required. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. And Councillor Hannaford, second, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to second the proposals set out by Councillor Dwelly. So in January 2019, as Council declared a climate emergency, we knew that this would mean doing things differently, and this includes using our planning powers differently. The DPD policies sit under the existing policies and expand a number of areas across our existing plan. I'm going to hone in a bit on policy 14, which is about renewable energy, but I wanted to make the point that speaks to Councillor Bastin's question. If you look on page 73 of the report, you'll see the climate change decision making wheel, and thankfully it's all very green, which is really encouraging. But the climate change decision making wheel is a tool that seeks to balance that people and planet conundrum and conflict, try and make sure that there's social justice in this, as well as looking after our planet. So we are committed to taking forward the Council's ambition to meet 100% of Cornwall's electricity needs by renewable sources from 2030. So we have mapped areas of Cornwall that are most likely to accommodate wind energy regeneration. So like others, I want to push those boundaries and be ambitious, but we are hampered by the requirements to have general conformity with the National Planning Policy Framework. If we do attempt to push against these boundaries a bit too much, our DPD will be found unsound by the planning inspector and we will be sent back to start the process. So it's about pushing the boundaries, but knowing where that boundary is and how much we can go over it. However, there are several areas within the DPD where we do stretch those boundaries set by the NPPF, and a number of significant firsts for Cornwall. And again, this speaks to Councillor Bastin as well. Biodiversity net gain policy, putting in a requirement for 10% gain, and that's a full 2 years before the net gain is due to be mandated by government. Again, Cornwall being groundbreaking. Protecting and increasing tree canopy, a canopy requirement to increase tree cover in line with the character of Cornwall of 15%. Currently we're around sort of 10, 11, 12. Extra incentives to keep existing trees and hedges and encouraging more to be planted. My mailbox is full of people highlighting, why have they taken those trees down? We're often tied, our hands are tied from being able to protect those hedgerows and those trees. So this will help, this document will help. Energy efficiency. So we partnered with South West Energy Hub to reduce energy needs through insulation and then balancing that use with renewable generation on every home that's built. And finally, nature recovery. We've talked a lot about this morning. Recognising our pilot role with DEFRA in nature recovery networks, we're one of the first authorities to create a specific policy to steer nature recovery across Cornwall. So I think all these policies will help us meet our aspiration to be net carbon neutral by 2030. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Hannaford. Councillor Brown next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'll be brief. I'm just delighted to see that sustainable transport rightly features in these proposals. And our integrated transport system, the first outside of London, will play a key role in driving a modal shift to more sustainable forms of travel as we emerge from the restrictions of the pandemic. And we're committed to deliver this when the time is right, once we come out of COVID.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. And moving to the wider membership, our first group of three, Councillors Harris, Monk and Bastin. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Leader. Can I just ask a very simple question, because I can't see the answer. Councillor Dwelly referred to page 83 and the statement we are in our budget, we are already committing £175 million directly, and a much higher amount is set aside for various Cornwall Council investments. Could Councillor Dwelly please point me to where in the budget I can find these numbers, because I certainly can't see them with a fairly quick look.
Thank you. Councillor Monk, please.
Thank you, Leader. Just a question for Tim, really. I agree with the direction of travel that we're moving with the climate emergency, and I'm particularly happy to see that he's agreed now that the charging point for our council-owned car parks could be a great way forward to provide the future requirement for electric charging points. What I'm a little less clear on is that there's some future provision for renewable energy sites such as solar PV or onshore wind, but I'm not hearing enough conversation about the grid capacity and the grid network that's going to be needed to upgrade it to accommodate this extra production of renewable power. So I just need some reassurance that that's being taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monk, and Councillor Bastin, please.
Right, thank you, Leader. Two questions, one slightly different to the other. The first one is something I've been on about for a very long time, Tim, and that's the fact we don't seem to be protecting our grade 3+ land and looking after our food security. There doesn't seem to be any block on developers moving into grade 3+ land, and that would be nice to see that in the DPT. And the second one is renewable energy, really. If you look historically at our industries, many of those industries use water. For example, the powder mill at Kenmore Mill in Ponsanooth. And I'm just wondering why we've never really looked at water again for local electricity generation. It needn't be fed into the grid at all. It could sort of feed a village or even a small town. So I'm just wondering why that's not been looked at as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. Lots and lots of work done on hydro, Councillor Bastin, but I'll go across to Councillor Dwelly and then take the next group of councillors. So Councillor Dwelly, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and thank you everyone for those. Councillor Harris, the budget figure, well, the reason it's not on a line in the budget is that the budget's not set out in that way. The officers have looked through all the relevant budgets and come up with that figure. Obviously, more than happy to have them share that with you if you want to scrutinise that, but the budget isn't currently presented in that way, and funny you should say that, because maybe in the future we should do this, and I'm going to take that as a good idea, but certainly we'd be very happy to share that with you. Councillor Monk, yes, absolutely agree with you about the grid. I have to say this is the #1 priority for us in terms of lobbying government for change, because we all know, and you're quite correct, that grid capacity isn't what it should be in Cornwall, and I'm going to ask you and Conservative colleagues to make that case for us with the MPs, because if we all work together on this, we will maximise the opportunity. Western Power are certainly in conversations with us, but we need to go a lot further. I will just add one other tiny thing, though, is that the way technology, as I'm sure you know, is developing, it is increasingly possible to store energy, and I'm sure what will happen, whatever the grid situation is, that we will increasingly look to store energy, not just to produce it only when the grid can take it. And I could give you a tiny example of that. In Stithians, a community centre has a storage facility with the solar power that we have funded through community infrastructure levy, and they will be storing some of that power. It's a tiny example, but a good one, I think. Councillor Harris, I've got your point in the sidebar. Yes, I will ask officers to do that. Absolutely no problem at all. Councillor Bastin, yes, completely take your point about food security. I would like to point out, though, that it's not always a choice. Where I live, I can literally see sheep grazing underneath solar panels in a field near me. So it's not always a case of one or the other. They can interact, and of course, many things can be grown around and underneath windmills. So I think we need to look at that again, and as you know, we're still out for consultation, and if you'd want to ask that question through to our officers dealing with this, I'm sure they can come back to you with an answer on that, and I'll get that for you. Another quick example, the sort of thing we could be doing is we could be investing with our own land in things like purification facilities to help our shellfish industry, which is so threatened by the government's inability to get exports going across to the EU. And I think that's the sort of thing we can be doing with our own land. It's a new idea we're working on at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And on hydro, so if we can just keep the sidebar for indicating for questions, please, colleagues. On hydro, I know officers have done a lot of work, and in conjunction with the Environment Agency as well, looking at historic sites such as Hale, Tidal Pool, Fro, Loo, Millpool, where there's sites historically and new sites as well. So it's certainly an area that we've explored. So I'll take the next two at the moment. If when Councillor Rushworth finishes, there isn't anyone else, then I'll be drawing a line there. Councillor Desmond and Councillor Rushworth. So Councillor Desmond first, please.
Thank you, Leader. My question concerns the coastal change and flooding. On page 72, flood risk is referred to, but the Cornwall Council flood risk strategy, I think, is still the 2014 document. I wonder if that has been updated, please, to account for the latest views on climate change, and in particular the flood risk assessment from 1 in 100 year events to a 1 in 1.85. Strange sort of figure, but it's actually closer to 2. So really just progress, please, on what's being done to recognise that flood risk is far more substantial than it was in the last 10 years or so.
Thank you. Councillor Nolan might want to respond to that one. Councillor Rushworth, your question, please.
Thank you, Leader. We all support this move to improve the grid in Cornwall, but and we as Conservatives will be pushing as much as possible pressure on the government to achieve this. But the stance of Great Western is that their grid has got the capacity to take 3 times as much electricity, as long as we spread the times in which we use it, so smart meters and everything. There's nothing in this document to try and support that, and also the move to electric cars will only be achieved if people can charge them up, and most of the areas, especially in places like Truro, where it's virtually going to be impossible to get charging points across the, or very expensive across the pavements. Don't you think that the council's policy at the moment of closing car parks, where they could electric points could easily be installed in every bay, is a bit contradicting the policy that you're doing at the moment? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rushworth. Western Power Distribution, I'm sure you meant rather than Great Western. Councillor Dwelly, please.
Yes, coming back in, and happy for Councillor Nolan to add to this, but on the flood risk point, I'm sure, Councillor Desmond, we can get you a response directly on that, or Councillor Nolan may be able to add more than I can. But what I would say is that the growth in incidents and the very serious incidents is exactly why we have a climate emergency. So we must do all this, obviously not just us, but around the world, because that's exactly why we have to have these documents and this new approach. So my answer, I guess, is the more flood risks we have, the more we need to do. So I don't think flood risks undermine this document, quite the opposite. They show why it's essential. I don't know if you want to come in, Councillor Nolan. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Desmond. Councillor Desmond, you'll know, there's a great deal of work going on. The Long Rock project that's just been completed, Star at St Austell Bay that's well underway. There's two bids in at the moment with the Environment Agency for one to deal with the sand dunes all around Cornwall, and then a specific project for Mevergissey to look at the flooding issues there, particularly in the waters that are coming down. And of course, you'll know all about the beaver projects, reintroducing beavers. But yeah, a great deal of work going on. I'll get a full response for you, Councillor Desmond, from the officers, so you can be completely brought up to date.
Thank you. Councillor Dwelly, anything further?
Not on that one, but I do want to answer Councillor Rushworth, if that's okay, on smart technology. But of course, Councillor Rushworth, some of a policy that's a planning policy won't be just about technology, and so there are obviously levels of detail that won't be something we necessarily enforce as a planning priority ourselves. But I do want to point out that smart grids are a feature of places like our Benton League turbine project. So we are well aware of this, and we have some excellent officers working for the council looking at all of this, including on our own estate. So as we review use of our own property, we will be looking towards that. So I hope that answers that, but I can only say that we all share a desire to improve the technology and to improve the grid, and let's work together to that end. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor Dwelly. That's been proposed and seconded. So Democratic Services Officer, if we can move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Eathorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And Councillor Rob Rothschild.
For.
Thank you, everyone. I confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we're moving on the environmental theme to agenda item number 8, the European Sites Mitigation Supplementary Planning Document, again with Councillor Dwelly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This should be a relatively straightforward item. This is something that we are already having to do because it's in our plan as a requirement. And I don't want to go into great detail here. Very happy for us to answer questions, but I'll need to bring in officers if there are specific questions on this. But effectively, this is all about protecting key areas of habitat in accordance with European sites generally, and it's something that's part of government law. So this is, for anyone thinking about Brexit, etc., that's irrelevant. This is something the UK government is committed to. Good. And we're doing our part, and I'm really pleased to bring this towards Cabinet. I'm just going to read formally, so if you forgive me for a moment, just getting the text out so I can read it to you in full, so we know exactly what we're voting on. Bear with me. So the recommendation is that the European Sites Mitigation Supplementary Planning Document is adopted and published, and an authority be delegated to the Service Director for Planning and Sustainable Development in consultation with the portfolio holder for Culture, Economy and Planning and Monitoring Officer to make any such minor amendments to the document as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly, and Councillor Nolan to second, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'm very happy to second the recommendations for the European Sites Mitigation Supplementary Planning Document. This SPD will ensure that the value of these habitats of European significance are protected. These sites have the highest level of environmental protection available in the UK and are of vital importance to Cornwall. The mitigation strategy as set out in the SPD will ensure the delivery of strategically led mitigation and monitoring for each site to ensure their future conservation status. The SPD and mitigation strategy provides a simplified process for developers to meet the requirements of the Habitat Regulations assessment and reduce burdens on applicants by focusing on the right solutions. I second the recommendation that the European Sites Mitigation Supplementary Planning Document is adopted and published. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Nolan. Currently, no Cabinet members indicated, so I'll go to the wider membership. Councillor Alvey, please.
Thanks, Leader, and thanks, Councillor Dwelly. I'm broadly supportive of the mitigation charges, which are, as explained, a revamp of the current system, and understand how they are to be used. However, the wider public don't, and I just ask, is it possible, for example, to better publicise the work of the wardens employed with the funds raised from these charges? And also, has consideration been given to extending a levy to new annexes and sizable rebuilds, much in the same way as SIL is charged for such increases in property size and as such also occupation? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Alvey. Councillor Desmond, please.
Mine's a fairly simple question. On page 305, reference is made at paragraph 2.27. Contributions from developers are already being received for large-scale planning applications. It is proposed that contributions should commence for all scales of development, etc. Can you please give me some figures to go with that that record there?
Thank you. And I can't see that anyone else has indicated. So Councillor Dwelly, please.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Alvey, better publicising the wardens funded. I think that's a very good idea. Thank you for suggesting it. I will take that up. And I very much agree. We should always be explaining where there's a benefit from when funds are raised. So thank you for that. In terms of the new annexes and rebuilds and idea and really related the whole thing across to contributions, I don't have a simple answer to that. I'm not sure whether the leader wants to bring in one of the planning officers to give a view there. I'm happy for them to do so, or we can get something to you in writing. I'll let the leader decide what's best. And Councillor Desmond, no, I don't have figures to hand now. Again, we can get you those. What I can say to you on a related point, as we've been talking about environment and climate, is that, as you know, I have been pushing very much for funds raised through developer contributions to be used for low carbon infrastructure whenever possible through the SIL process. So I'm going to be looking at this particular source and see whether that relates and dovetails in with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms Wood, Service Director for Planning and Sustainable Development, would you like to comment?
Hello, Julian. Thank you for that. Hopefully you can hear me. My screen appears to have frozen a little bit, but Julian's nodding, so I think that means he can hear me. So I do take on board the comments that Councillor Alvey has made in relation to the rebuild for annexes, but really this is about dealing with additional growth, and it is about the growth in terms of dwellings and therefore in terms of people. So whilst I accept that you may extend a dwelling and it's possible that more people might live in it, I suppose, I'm afraid I don't think that's an argument that we could sustain in terms of seeking contributions. It really is about new dwellings that have been created and managing the mitigation in that respect. So we don't think that we could take that any further.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had that proposed and seconded. So we'll move to the vote then. Democratic Services Officer, please.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mikey Thorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Rob Rochell.
For.
Thank you, everyone. I confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So moving on then, agenda item number 9, the final report of the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service risk-based inspection programme inquiry. Councillor Nolan, please.
Thank you, Leader. In 2016, the Fire and Rescue Service policy was moved back to the Home Office within central government. The Home Office reintroduced inspections of fire and rescue services and formed Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services. Cornwall Fire and Rescue Services were placed in the first tranche of the new inspections in July 2018, with the Inspectorate report issued in December of the same year. The Inspectorate listed 2 areas for improvement for our protection or fire safety team. In response, the service commissioned a protection-themed peer review, and in July 2019, a joint team from the Local Government Association and the National Fire Chiefs Council reviewed the service's fire safety arrangements and produced a report with 6 recommendations. These were presented to the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee in October 2019. As a result, the committee agreed that its inquiry for 2020-21 would be in relation to Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service and its risk-based inspection programme, and the objectives of the inquiry were agreed as: 1, to consider whether the current risk assessment of risk is an appropriate model for Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, and 2, to consider the future allocation of resource to deliver Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service's overarching protection role, including statutory and non-statutory activities, and the primary authority role. Leader, I would like to acknowledge and thank the inquiry panel, who have undertaken a very thorough, methodical and necessary piece of work. The inquiry panel was comprised of Councillor Rule as inquiry chairman, Councillors Martin Alvey, Dominic Fairman, Matt Luke and John Simmons, and the whole of the inquiry process was undertaken online via virtual meetings using Teams. The inquiry consisted of a virtual site visit to Park House Flats in St Austell, virtual information and evidence gathering sessions, witnesses in virtual attendance, and with written evidence also supporting. The inquiry has produced an excellent insight into the work of our protection team and provides useful evidence and guidance to Cornwall Fire and Rescue as it looks to increase the number of audits it delivers over a wider range of premises through a revised risk-based inspection programme. The final report of the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service risk-based inspection programme inquiry was agreed at full committee on 21st of January 2021, and I am here today to recommend to Cabinet the following: 1, that the Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee's final report of the Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service risk-based in programme inquiry and the recommendations contained within be approved, and 2, that HM Government grant funding received by Cornwall Fire and Rescue Services for protection work in relation to the Grenfell Tower inquiry outcomes for the next 12 months be used to fund resources for 2021-22, and for 2022-23 onwards this resource be identified from within the Neighbourhoods Directorate base budget. I particularly want to draw your attention for endorsement to recommendation 3, to lobby for HM Government funding based on the services profile of risk of our seasonal economy, rather than the year-round residence numbers. Our fire service is funded on resident population. Therefore, there is a disproportionate factor in terms of the number of visitors that Cornwall welcomes year-round. We do not want another serious fire and loss of life, which we tragically experienced in 2007 with the Penhallow fire, which was reported in the national news as the worst hotel fire for 40 years. Typically, our seasonal appeal is now over 9 to 10 months of the year, and we continue to grow as a destination of choice. Therefore, lobbying for fairer funding of our fire and rescue service will continue to be made by government by myself and our Chief Fire Officer. Our fire service is an insurance policy, and we must ensure that Cornwall is safe and compliant for our residents, visitors and businesses alike. Leader, would you like me to read the recommendations again? I think they were contained within that, but
you've read recommendations 1 and 2, I think, verbatim, but you carried on speaking after you read recommendation 3, which is the new recommendation. So I think for clarity, if you could read recommendation 3 again. Thank you.
I don't have recommendation 3 again. Where's that?
Oh, sorry, it was recommendation 3 within the scrutiny report, wasn't it? Not recommendation.
Yeah. I've got 1 and 2. It's 2 recommendations.
Just 2 on this. So
I've read those out.
Recommendation 3 in the scrutiny report. Excellent. Thank you. Sorry, I'm confusing you. I confused myself. Apologies. So we'll move swiftly on then to Councillor Mitchell to second. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Rob. I'll also start by adding my thanks to the members of the inquiry panel, Councillors Rule, Fairman, Alvey, Simmons and Luke. A thorough report which gives clear recommendations following what had been a very detailed inquiry gathering evidence from across the sector. And this was important. Colleagues will recall the tragic events of the Grenfell Tower fire in June of 2017, a tragedy that should not have happened, and it is vital that the whole sector, including those that regulate, learn lessons from this. I am therefore satisfied to note that the inquiry team heard from a wide range of witnesses, including the chair of the National Chief Fire Officers Council for Protection and Business Safety, staff who deliver fire safety and other regulatory services across Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, and our wider council, including planning, building control, licensing and event safety groups, representatives of Visit Cornwall, Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, and of course, as you would expect me to highlight, representatives from the housing sector, including our own private sector housing team within Cornwall Council. Of course, this builds upon the good work already done by Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, Cornwall Council and Cornwall councillors who have voted to ensure sprinkler systems or similar suppression systems, to control and extinguish developing fires are installed in all domestic premises we as a council either build or commission. A first amongst English councils and something that we can all be proud of. Again, I note with satisfaction the role Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service has taken in supporting the installation of sprinklers in our highest risk residential building, Park House Flats in St Austell. A building of 12 floors with a single staircase throughout, and I commend Ocean Housing, the building owners, for their investment in this life safety system. However, we know budgets are under pressure. Colleagues will note that the initial funding to support a resource increase with fire safety in Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service will come for the first 12 months from Her Majesty's government funding. Funding that was provided by the Home Office to see improvements and an increase in fire safety activity within fire and rescue services, including our own here in Cornwall. Following years, 2022 onwards, funding will be found from within existing resource and budget within the Neighbourhood Directorate's base budget. It is for these reasons, which will help reinforce public safety, that I am happy to second this proposal. By approving, we continue to provide leadership that makes Cornwall safer and support our fire and rescue service. Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, as it strives to increase the number of fire safety audits it delivers across a wider range of premises through a revised risk-based inspection programme that will ensure premises within Cornwall that fall under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order of 2005 are safe, compliant and supported. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Brown, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader, and I commend the report. I think it's an excellent report, and clearly prevention is better than cure. But having been at the Penhallow fire, the whole duration of that fire, from early hours to right into the morning, I would commend the work of not just the fire service, but the emergency services on that and many other occasions who do an excellent job to keep us safe. But I would support the continued lobbying of government for fairer funding, both for our fire and police service, which actually recognises the huge increase in the population of Cornwall during the tourist season. As a formal portfolio holder for fire and public protection, I had instigated the additional nighttime cover at Newquay Fire Station during the high season to recognise the almost quadrupling of the town's summer population. And as the UK's foremost holiday destination, Cornwall welcomes thousands of visitors every year, but receives no financial recognition of that fact to support either fire or police prevention. And I think we need to keep lobbying for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. And Councillor Rule has been referenced as chairing the inquiry, also chair of the relevant scrutiny committee. Councillor Rule, if you'd like to come in, please.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, I would very much like to. Really, just to set the scene, in response to the recommendation resulting from the Local Government Association Protection Themed Peer Challenge of Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service, CFRS, in 2019, requesting existing levels of member oversight of their work to be built on to ensure there's sufficient awareness and understanding of member accountability in relation to protection, Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee committee resolved to undertake an inquiry in relation to the risk-based inspection programme in the autumn of 2020. I would like to also thank my fellow members of the Inquiry Task and Finish group for all their dedicated hard work in making the inquiry a success. They are, as already mentioned, Councillors Martin Alvey, Dominic Fairman, Matt Luke and John Simmons. But I would also like to thank Joanne Heather from Cornwall Council's Democratic Services and Justin Sharp from Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service for all their hard work in supporting the inquiry. An inquiry cannot be held without the input of expert witnesses, and I'm very grateful and would like to thank all the witnesses that took part in the inquiry, whether by virtually attending one of our online recorded witness evidence gathering sessions or by providing written evidence. Details of all the witnesses can be found in the report, in section 7 of the report. Although it was an intense piece of work, I think we all found the inquiry process a very interesting and worthwhile experience, and we're pleased to be able to make evidence-based recommendations to Cabinet with regard to the RBIP and protection in general. The recommendations with the rationale for them, examples of evidence received and conclusions are all detailed in section 5 of the report. But although they don't form part of the recommendations, there were 3 common themes that were raised by many of the witnesses, which I think are important to mention here with your indulgence, Leader. That is how very well respected and valued Cornwall Fire and Rescue Service is by other council services and external partners. The work of CFRS in advising businesses is considered exemplary and is considered a key means of support as opposed to an opportunity to enforce. The benefits of joint working and how the CFRS brand of being a trusted blue light service opens the public's doors for other services when there is a uniformed officer working alongside them. CFRS has a community presence akin to the police. Officers are welcomed into homes, enabling services to be the eyes and ears for each other. The benefit of the Council and CFRS being part of it brings to business through being a large unitary authority with regulators under the same umbrella, with the ability to share back office services and have access to services across Cornwall. I commend the report to you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for all of your work on this, as well as your colleagues and the others that you've highlighted. I'm not seeing anyone else putting a X in the sidebar, so I'm just going to speak for a moment to give the opportunity before we move to the vote. Okay, I can't see anyone else that's indicated, in which case it's been proposed and seconded. Democratic Services Officer, if we could move to the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Thorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And Councillor Rob Rotchell.
For.
Thank you, everyone. I can confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So agenda item number 10 next, working with and developing local supply chains. Councillor Thorne-Gibbons, if you'd like to introduce this one, please.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I wish to place on record my thanks to some members and our officers. Firstly, to the Chairman, Richard Buscombe, and members of the CAS Scrutiny Committee for their direction and conclusions on this complex issue. Secondly, to the Chairman, Martin Eddy, and members of the CAS Working Party for their thorough and comprehensive analysis of the issue. I note from the sidebar, Chairman, that Councillor Eddy is present today, and he may wish to comment at the appropriate time as we go through. Thirdly, I'd like to place on record my thanks to the council officers, to Rachel Rotherow and her team for their detailed study and support over several months. Moving on to the report itself, Leader, I highlight 5 points before reading out the recommendations on pages 443 and 444 of the papers before us. Firstly, the scale of the work. This was huge. and it covered a substantial spend of nearly 800 million with around 5,800 suppliers, some 56% of which are local. Secondly, there is the need to support our taxing ratepayers with the best possible service at the lowest possible cost, bearing in mind the need to drive sustainability, promote social well-being and minimise environmental damage. This means the inclusion of the foundation living wage, carbon neutral objectives and developing initiatives such as the Forest for Cornwall. The result of the work undertaken in working with and developing local supply chains has resulted in a refreshed responsible procurement policy and a social policy note, details of which are found on pages 503 to 526 of members' papers. In the latter regard, as set out on page 446, it is proposed that social value be given a 5%, 15% weighting for new contracts above a certain level, see para 2.7, but for smaller contracts this will be 10%, para 2.9, and for even smaller ones, para 2.10, not mandated consideration. This issue regarding scale and weighting and the various options relating thereto was given considerable thought during the working party's review, and I see no reason to revisit today, though experience of its operations in future years may warrant further review. Fourthly, I draw members' attention to pages 482 to 485 and the lengthy recommendations from the working party to the scrutiny committee and thence to cabinet. I'm happy to endorse them. I would highlight the proposals for CAS officers to work with the Council's Economic Growth Service and Local Enterprise Partnership to seek a coordinated approach, and also to work with Cornwall's business bodies, the Federation of Small Business and the Chamber of Commerce, to ensure joint understanding and closer support. As Cabinet Member responsible for procurement, I'm happy to support recommendation 5 on page 485 to show leadership in developing social value, including carbon reduction, in adding value and maximising every pound spent in Cornwall, and using my influence to ensure CorServe and the group of companies sign up to the proposed policy framework. Fifth and finally, I comment briefly on the Council motion on procurement principles and Cornwall suppliers from Councillors Kirkham and Desmond. Details are set out on pages 527 to 534 of your papers. The leader reported at recent full council that a significant number of the recommendations of the motion had been considered in detail by CAS inquiry and were reported as such to last council. As can be seen from the papers, the issues of social value, climate change, major suppliers, supplier registration, procurement platform, financial criteria have all been addressed and are set out in more detail in the papers. Leader, that concludes what I have to say. Read out the recommendations unless you feel that it might be appropriate to ask Councillor Eddy to comment.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne-Gibbons. If you could read out the recommendations, please.
Yeah, happy so to do. First recommendation is the recommendations of the Working With and Developing Local Supply Chains Working Group as set out in section 5, pages 28 to 31 of the report attached to Appendix 1 are approved with the following addition to recommendation 2A. Initially, this will need to be restricted to services contracts, not works or supplies contracts, until such time as the Local Government Act 1988, section 17, which prohibits a local authority from taking into account the location of business activities or interests of contractors, may be repealed or amended to override the prohibition. Recommendation 2. The draft responsible procurement policy attached to Appendix 2 to the report is approved once amended to reflect the above addition to Recommendation 2A of the Working Group's report. Recommendation 3. The draft social value policy note attached as Appendix 3 to the report is approved once amended to reflect the above addition to Recommendation 2A of the Working Group's report. Then there is a recommendation to the Leader of the Council that the leader writes the Cabinet Office to lobby for the repeal or amendment of Section 17 of the Local Government Act 1988, removing the restrictions that apply to local authorities in respect of reserving contracts for works or supplies. That's all I have to say, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gibbons. And if I can bring in Councillor Painter to second, please.
Thank you, Leader. Very happy to second those recommendations. So the Council spends over 800 million a year on third-party suppliers, delivering a range of services on behalf of the Council. As well as procurements delivering their primary purpose, it is essential that they also go further and deliver wider economic and social benefits to Cornwall. The outcome of this inquiry and these policies will support the Council to go beyond the ambitions of central government and many other councils to support Cornish suppliers to bring wider benefits to Cornwall. As Councillor Gibbons has highlighted, this builds on the policy direction we've taken over the administration to become an accredited foundation living wage supplier, moving to ensure that all our suppliers pay their staff the foundation living wage and the supporting the sustainability of our supply chain throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. So in summary, I want to highlight to you what this will mean in practice. So from April, we will directly award contracts of up to 25,000 to Cornish suppliers. Whilst of course there may be small exceptions, this will become the norm. There is currently no such obligation. We will make the economic, social and environmental benefits of what the supplier can much bigger, waiting on the evaluation to decide who gets the work. Between 25,000 and up to the threshold, there will be a requirement to consider a 10% weighting for social value. Currently, there is no expectation locally or from government of any percentage weighting. We will default to 15% weighting for above threshold procurements and look to push social value further where the procurement allows never going below the 10% government policy. This is a huge step forward as the Council's policy is currently between 3 and 15%. We recognise that businesses will have fantastic ideas about how to maximise value in the broadest sense and invest in our communities and ensure that every pound earned from public sectors must further benefit Cornwall. By embedding social value into our commissioning and procurement, we believe it's possible to deliver more value to our communities. Whatever sector the supply chain, the Council is now asking for bold, innovative leadership to make sure that the additional social value for Cornwall is central to their organisation and response. Thank you very much and happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Painter. Councillor Dwelly next, please.
Yes, I want to welcome this very much. Something I've been asking about and for some years now, and I think we're making great progress. I do have one slight concern because I like us to be ambitious and to set the trends. And I know with the real living wage, we were the first unitary rural authority to do that. And I think we are breaking new ground here, but particularly on the social value percentage, my understanding is that 10% is the national legal minimum, if you like. What I'm wondering is, although we're not going to vote on this, I'm wondering whether the portfolio holder and cabinet colleagues could, for the record, show an indication that we're willing to go further. And that we could perhaps in the future consider moving towards what Manchester achieves, which is 15% social value. I certainly would prefer that, but I fully appreciate that we do need to take steps carefully. So can we have an element of ambition beyond this set of proposals so that people understand that we want to go further if we can? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So no further cabinet members have indicated. So Councillor Gibbons, if you'd like to respond, please.
Yes, happy to respond to that comment. I have considerable sympathy with what Councillor Dwelly has said. I did indicate in my earlier remarks that we'd look at the operation of things as it goes forward, but certainly it's something I'm very happy to take on board and to consider at a future time.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbons. So Councillor Eddy has already been referenced as chairing that working group. So Councillor Eddy, if you'd like to come in, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to speak to this report. It's been a fascinating piece of work, really, delivered by teams during Brexit and through the COVID crisis. So really, my thanks must go to all officers, the members, Councillor Mould, Keeling, Moorcroft and Frost for their help, to the officers and to the organisations that have been involved. The full report with its recommendations can be found in Appendix 1. And in our inquiry, working with and enhancing our supply chains, we realised that this is a rapidly evolving area of work. We realised that in doing the enhancing and the working with supply chains, it was improvements to the social, environmental and economic outputs of our contracts that would make the greatest benefit for the council and the people of Cornwall. Our approach has been to refresh the policy background, set out new target parameters for the assessment of contracts. We've sought out potential partners to work with, and we seek to encourage the organisational culture required to deliver these recommendations. We've been outward looking in our approach, talking with partners inside the council and outside of Cornwall, and we hope now to they can work with us to raise awareness of what social value is. And how it can be delivered within the contract. And also picking up the earlier point, we made a recommendation that scrutiny look at these recommendations in 12 months' time to see how they're working and to see if the social value assessments can be increased. We know that it's a fast-moving area of work, with relevant parliamentary procedure notes being published since we finished the inquiry. This consequently saw our recommendations being modified as you see them today. So, Chairman, Leader, in closing, really, if we get this right, the council has a mechanism to engage with more Cornish businesses for millions more of our spend to remain within the county, all of which will help with the recovery of our economy here post COVID-19. And I commend the report to you, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eddy, and to all of those involved in the working group. Our thanks for bringing this forward. Councillor Kirkham, please. No other members indicated at the moment, so now's your chance to indicate, colleagues. Councillor Kirkham.
Thank you very much, Leader. You know that I've been, as you spoke about my motion, I've been involved with this for a long time as well. And I have written to Cabinet last week to say that I'm really pleased. There's been an awful lot of work done on this, and some of the officers have worked incredibly hard. Councillor Eddy chaired a really thorough inquiry. We had people come from councils all over the country to explain how they deal with social value. And I think that Councillor Painter and Councillor Eddy did go some way to explaining what social value means, because I think at the start of this was quite difficult for people to get a handle on the actual meaning of it and what it will do for Cornwall, because it's kind of a vague expression. So social value is basically paying people decently, short supply chains, apprenticeships, training, ploughing money, keeping money in the Cornish economy so it can circulate within the Cornish economy. So basically the people of Cornwall will have more money to spend, and that's what we can do by concentrating on social value in our contracts. I agree with Councillor Dwelly. I was slightly disappointed that on contracts between 25 and the 1,000 and the ODU levels that we were sticking to 10%, because I did understand that in the new guidelines that are coming in, 10% would be the minimum. I thought we were an ambitious council. We have backed foundation living wage. We could go further, so I would be pleased if Cabinet could commit to that and to looking at going further. And I was also pleased because other councils such as Plymouth do look at default giving smaller contracts under 25k to local suppliers. So I'm glad that we'll be doing that. And obviously we do need to look at our definition of local suppliers because it needs tightening up. So I'm glad we're doing that too. It's a shame about the 1988 Act. I think, again, that's a very small risk that we maybe could have been a bit braver on, but hopefully that will be dealt with and we will push in that direction. I'm really pleased that as a council we are going in this direction. I do think we could go further and faster, as I've just said. But hopefully Cabinet will consider that, and in the future it's something that we'll be able to push on even more and become a leader in the country. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkham. And Councillor Desmond, who is seconder of the motion. Councillor Desmond, please.
Thank you, Leader. And I want to echo also my gratitude to all those who participated in bringing forward this current paper. I've had the pleasure of trying to encourage the use of local businesses and suppliers through the purchasing capabilities of Cornwall Council and their needs. And this is going a long way to achieving that, and work at Councillor Kirkham on a cross-party basis to see the emphasis upon the use of local suppliers to support our jobs and prosperity in Cornwall is something that I think is a very valuable policy initiative. But I also feel that Councillor Dwelly and Councillor Kirkham have made very important points about ambition. I too feel that there is a need for more ambition in this motion, and I will probably have something more to, well, I know I will have a lot more to say at full council when it comes forward for adoption. But in the meantime, I'd like to leave you with these thoughts, and perhaps you can help me with this. The definition of a local supplier seems to be one that is a problem, because it's causing you as a council to misrepresent the number of local suppliers you describe as being supported currently. You refer to the definition based upon a postcode. I don't want to go naming names, but there are some very, very large businesses that you currently employ who don't have any persons employed in Cornwall directly, but they do have a brass plate somewhere. They have a postcode. One has one outside a coffee shop, and they can't use that anymore because COVID has closed it down, but they are still getting hundreds of thousands of pounds in fees and costs, which is outside this county where the skills are available to provide similar, if not better, capabilities. So I would like to know what it is you intend to do about defining the postcode and defining what is meant by local supplier. Secondly, I'd like to know what's intended by way of an implementation program. I'm conscious of the fact that I've worked on this for many months before we finally put the motion to council on the 7th of July last year, and that it has been, and I mean this with no disrespect, buried in the bureaucracy of Cornwall Council for over 6 months now. And it really is something that we need to put in place quickly. It's imperative that we support our local businesses, our jobs, our prosperity, apprenticeships, decent salaries, decent wages. COVID-19 has been a huge detriment to the competence and capability of a lot of our businesses, and we are losing them. So from a societal point of view, I think it is absolutely vital we have a firm view on a program for implementation. And then finally, I'd just like to know how this mechanism can be achieved through the e-commerce platform, which I know many purchasers in government agencies and through local authorities have in place. They are there ready for us to take off the shelf and put into place. So please, can you confirm that there is an e-commerce platform that is now considered the way forward, that you have a preferred system ready to put forward? And if so, what's the specification?
Thank you, Councillor Desmond.
Thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor Ethorne Gibbons for everything he's done on this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So no one else has indicated, so that's Councillor Desmond's hand. Yeah. No one else has indicated. Councillor Ethorne Gibbons, if you'd like to respond, please. You're on mute, Mike. Thank you.
Okay. I've unmuted my mic, Mike. Okay. Yes, certainly the points that made by Councillor Dwelly, Councillor Eddy and Kirkham, and also Councillor Desmond regarding the percentage, the 10%. Yes, I do make that commitment. I did say in my introductory remarks that we'd look at it again and I think that's absolutely right. I'm sure the minutes will record that commitment now. Certainly, I do agree with Councillor Kirkham and also Councillor Desmond in terms of the need for us to look at the definition of a local supplier. It's something that I have been asking officers to look at for some time, and certainly from this meeting, I'm sure it will be looked at. As Rachel Rotherow is here, she might like to comment on this one. Certainly in terms of the specific from Councillor Desmond, the e-commerce platform, certainly I'm happy to ask the officers to look at that. I think it's important. As ever with these things, I've had a number of meetings with suppliers, local suppliers in the past, and clearly the nature of how they deal with the council is changing, and we have to get the balance right between a simple, efficient system which they can respond to and not tying them up too much in bureaucracy. And clearly the increasing use of e-commerce is going to be essential going forward. So I think those are all the comments I'll make at the moment, Leader. If Rachel Rotherow is here, she might like to comment on one or two other matters.
Thank you, Councillor Ethorne-Gibbons, and I apologise. My video is not working, so it's just a voice. In terms of the response to the questions, in terms of the definition of Cornish suppliers, you're absolutely right. That is one of the recommendations coming out of the inquiry that we need to look at. The current position in relation to how we measure Cornish suppliers is linked to effectively the postcode around which the invoices are sent from. So there is some work that needs to be done around that. In relation to the e-commerce system or our e-procurement contract management system, you will note from the response to the motion that there is work underway at the moment to implement a new system that will be in place by April. It's called Proactis, and Councillor Desmond is absolutely right. There are lots of good examples out there of best practice. What this will enable the council to do is to bring together its procurement and its contract management and supplier relationship management into one place, and it is much more user friendly, and we are doing testing at the moment with our supply chain around making sure that effectively suppliers are able to use that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that was Ms Rotherow, Head of Investments and Commercial. So colleagues, that's been moved and seconded. Democratic Services Officer, if you'd like to move to the vote, please.
Could I just have a follow-up? I haven't heard anything about the implementation programme.
We'll come back to you, Councillor Desmond. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Ethorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And Councillor Rob Rotchell.
For.
Thank you, everyone. I can confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. And colleagues, agenda item number 11, I advised at the beginning of the meeting, following the decision of Strategic Planning Committee, I have withdrawn the Cabinet report in respect of the Pydar redevelopment. This matter will not therefore be discussed at today's meeting. Councillor Rotchell is keen to carry on, but as we have been doing well, I think I'm going to take a break now until 11:50 because we may get through the rest of the items without the need to break for lunch. So we'll take a brief comfort break now until 11:50. Thank you, colleagues. Hello, good afternoon. Not good afternoon yet, nearly good afternoon. But welcome back, colleagues. 11:50 on my computer. I'm assuming all of our computers say the same time. So hopefully Councillor Rochall is keen again to do item 12, the adult social care charging policy. Councillor Rochall to introduce, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. The consultation on the adult social care charging policy ended on the 11th of November 2020, and the purpose of this paper is to provide feedback on the consultation, explain the impact of the main changes, and for Cabinet to decide which changes should be implemented from the 12th of April 2021. The report summarises the outcome of consultation on the revised adult social care charging policy and recommends that the policy is endorsed for approval by Cabinet. The draft policy was written following informal engagement with voluntary and community sector organisations to help improve accessibility of the language used. The draft was endorsed by consultation by Health Scrutiny in March 2020, and they endorsed the revised charging policy in January 2021. And I'm grateful for Scrutiny's continued support in the transformation of adult social care. A period of 5 months consultation started on the 11th of June 2020 and included 28 public online events, 20 additional online events for other organisations, telephone engagement and gaining feedback via an online survey. Awareness of the consultation was undertaken using mainstream and social media, voluntary care organisations, direct mailing to people known to adult social care and residents' newsletters. The Council published a range of resources including the draft policy, an easy read version explaining the main changes and how to get involved, an online and printable version of the survey, and a video explaining the changes and case studies. 359 people responded to the survey, and there was a good mix of people responding, with most people being either a client or a carer or representative of someone with care needs. The majority of respondents felt that the policy is easy to understand and support a self-service option to apply for financial assistance. The feedback on the main policy changes were: 1. Charging for home care from the date services commence. 60% of people agreed with this change. 2. Charging for respite care using short stay rules for temporary stays. 35% of people agreed with this change. Although this figure is relatively low, it is worth noting that the most common additional comment was that all adult social care should be free. And I refer back to the leader's announcements at the beginning of the meeting, where he reported a letter he had sent to government regarding future funding of social care. The second most common response was that younger people with disabilities would need to use their disability benefits to meet these costs. It is worth noting that disability related benefits are intended to cover such care costs. 3. Removing the subsidy for meals. 54% of people agreed that it was fair to charge for full cost for people who are supplied with a meal. And 4. Charging a fee to self-funders for arranging their care. 40% of people felt it was fair to charge self-funders a fee to arrange their care. And again, the most common additional comment was that all adult social care should be free. The impact of these policy changes are as follows. Firstly, the charge for home care from the date services start. It will only affect new clients, and it will increase income by £122,000 a year. 2. Use short stay rules to calculate respite charges, and this will affect 233 people aged over 65 and 246 people aged between the ages of 18 and 65. It will increase income by £240,000 a year. People aged under 65 currently an average of 2.6 respite nights a month, and an average charge increase of £48 a month. People aged 65 plus currently have an average of 1.8 respite nights per month, and this would be an increase of roughly £42 a month. 3. Remove subsidy for meals. This would affect 44 people and increase income by £5,220, or an average of £130 per person per year. And finally, the charge for arranging services for self-funders. Only new self-funding clients would be affected On an average, we have 12 new self-funding clients per month. Each new self-funding client would pay a fee of £300 if they want us to arrange a package of care for them. This would yield an income of £43,200 a year. So I'll read the recommendations. Recommendation 1, that the findings from the consultation process be considered, that the proposed draft adult social care charging policy as set out in Appendix 1 to the report for implementation from the 12th of April 2021 be approved. And 3, that authority be delegated to the strategic director with responsibility for adult social care to make amendments to the policy from time to time to ensure it reflects the council's legal obligations in consultation with the portfolio holder for adults, the monitoring officer, and where there are financial implications, the Section 151 officer. And in the event that the strategic director is unable to act, the delegation may be exercised by the chief executive or the chief executive's office. And I propose that we accept those recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Rochall, and I'm going to second the adult social care charging policy. These recommendations bring the charging policy for Cornwall Council into line with the majority of local authorities, and as Councillor Rochall has just described and as within the report, has been the subject of significant and extended consultation, and therefore content to second the recommendations as laid out. So, colleagues, Cabinet, the wider membership, anyone wanting to come in on this item? I think is Councillor Toms with us, Chair of the Relevant Scrutiny Committee, just having a quick look to see. No, he's not with us. Anyone wanting to come in? I know it's been subject to extensive discussion within the council as well as the consultation. Just pausing for a moment. If no one indicates, then we will move to the vote. No, okay. Democratic Services Officer, if you'd like to move to the vote, please. Thank you. To take the vote.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly. Councillor Dwelly, I didn't quite hear that. Still there. Councillor Dwelly? I'll come back to Councillor Dwelly. Councillor Mikey Thorne-Gibbons.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And Councillor Rob Rochall.
For.
Thank you. I'll just call for Councillor Dwelly's vote again. Are you there, please, Councillor Dwelly? He may well be having technical issues, I assume.
Yeah, or an extended break, but we're by majority of all of those present, so
that's correct.
Happy with that.
Lovely. So those recommendations are carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll move on then to agenda item number 13, the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan, Medium-Term Budget and Rent Setting for 2021 to 2022, and proposed acquisition of 17 homes at Maid. Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Leader. This report is coming to members as part of the approval process that the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan needs to follow through to full council. The business plan, medium-term budget and rent setting for 2021-22 need to be approved by full council on the 23rd of February at the latest, excuse me, in order that enough time is available to make tenants aware of the changes to their rent. There is a statutory duty to set the HRA budget and ensure that it is balanced or in overall surplus, and to determine the rent for council house tenants each financial year. To note, the HRA does not impact on the general fund budget setting or the level of council tax. The 2021-22 to 2051-52 version of the HRA business plan provides an update on progress and will roll the plan forward each year. COVID-19 has had and continues to have an impact on the HRA, as it has on other council plans and budgets, and work continues to better understand what the implications are for the remainder of this year and into subsequent years. In terms of this current year, 2020-21, this includes planned repairs and maintenance being delayed during the first lockdown, with only urgent repairs being undertaken, resulting in a backlog. The second and now third lockdown means tenants have concerns about workmen in their homes and has had an impact on catching up on this backlog, and some work will of necessity have to be carried forward into next year. Compliance checks and particularly gas servicing work has been delayed, and although the expectation was that these would be resolved within the current financial year, with CHL on track to achieve this third lockdown will have an impact. There was concern that a number of residents would have difficulty in paying their rent, but work undertaken by inclusion officers to support tenants, including assisting them with their accelerated move onto universal credit, has ensured that debt has been minimised to date and arrears are only slightly higher than previously experienced. Further lockdowns, end of furlough schemes and/or the increased levels of unemployment in the months ahead could increase the amount of arrears, and this situation will continue to be regularly monitored. COVID-19 continues to have a significant impact on a number of challenges remain, including continuing to support tenants to pay their rent and working with them to sustain their tenancy. And I would like to point out that our policy was and has been no tenants from CHL have been evicted for rent arrears during 2020-21. There are still limited numbers of operatives allowed to work in a property at any one time, and CHL are also unable to arrange viewings for prospective tenants until the property is ready to let, because they cannot go into properties where operatives are still working, all of which continues to have an impact on void turnaround times. Capacity within the internal teams to deliver the volume and values of the capital investment programme, and a significant risk to the programme now that they are in a third lockdown. The Tenants Forum has been engaged during the preparation of this year's report and are supportive of the proposals. A copy of the letter of support from the Tenants Forum is made available at Appendix 4. The intention has always been that we work with our tenants in 2021 as to what service priorities and improvements there should be a focus on, and which will inform the development of the new 5-year detailed and 30-year rolling plan for 2022-23 onwards. This will attune with the Council's focus on resourcing residents' priorities as far as practicable within the regulations. The publication of the Social Housing White Paper has come at an opportune time, and together with the revision of our residents' engagement strategy will ensure that tenants are fully engaged and collaborate with us on the development of future iterations of the HRA business plan. This will include increasing the availability of performance data and tenant satisfaction metrics. Work has continued on assessing the likely costs of the HRA achieving the council motion to become carbon neutral by 2030. It is currently anticipated that it will cost an additional 80 million to ensure the HRA achieves carbon neutrality, on top of the money already allocated through planned maintenance and replacement programmes, circa 45 million, so making a total of 125 million pounds. This will include the deployment of renewable heating systems, large-scale installation of solar panels, improved insulation, etc. It is assumed that a proportion of this additional cost will be funded through government grant programmes, but as this is a constantly evolving and emerging situation, it is difficult to estimate how much can be gained through this route, although it is thought that at least a quarter of the cost might be supported through grant. And I don't think anyone can underestimate the commitment of the council with such a programme to deliver carbon neutrality. The HRA development programme aims to deliver 1,700 homes at a cost of £205 million. This report contains a recommendation to Cabinet for authority to acquire an additional 17 homes in Mabe into the housing revenue account. And those are not affordable homes, those are social rented homes, which is what Cornwall needs. CHL receives a management fee each year from the council to manage council-owned housing stock. The fee is based on actual property numbers in the HRA on an annual basis. The core management fee will be increased based on rent performance, i.e. it's a conditional increase, and the intention is that it will be increased each year by CPI in line with all other council contracts. Nearly there, Leader. This report sets out a number of headline statements that are intended to provide an overview for members, and members are requested to consider this report and attached documents as part of the preparation for approval here at Cabinet and subsequently full council. So I'll now move those recommendations. They're on page 576 of the pack, and those are recommendations to council. Number 1, that the housing revenue account budget be set for 2021-22 and indicative budgets for the following 3 financial years be approved as detailed in Appendix 1, Revenue Statement, and Appendix 2, Capital Investment Programme to the report. 2, that the revised 30-year rolling HRA business plan presented in Appendix 3 to the report be adopted. 3, that both social and affordable dwelling rents and garage rents increase by CPI plus 1% for 2021-22 and subsequent years. That shared ownership properties rents be increased by RPI plus 0.5% for 2021 and 22 and subsequent years. And recommendation to Cabinet, number 5, that authority be delegated to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the portfolio holder for homes and the monitoring officer to acquire 17 homes in Mabe as described in the except appendices 5 to 8 in the report with the housing revenue account, subject to contract, with the transaction being in accordance with the valuation advice and satisfactory completion of all due diligence. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Dwelly to second, please.
Thank you, Leader, and my sincere apologies to Councillor Rob Rochell. I very much supported your item. I'm sorry I nipped out thinking there were going to be questions, and I don't think I've done that before. Won't happen again. Right, on this very important item, I'm, as you will know, very strong supporter of affordable housing, and the track record of this council on this has been phenomenal for many years, and this is part of what we do. I'm really pleased that the council is now back in the business of providing new council homes. I'm pleased to see that we are increasing the number of social rented homes as part of the mix of affordable housing, and also we shouldn't forget that it's not just about new homes. What we do, we are the largest housing provider and social landlord in Cornwall. We can and we are setting an example, and this relates back to our previous discussion on climate emergency. When we put significant investment into council homes, which Andrew Mitchell, our portfolio holder, is leading on, and good for him, we are, of course, emphasising energy performance. That's really important because over 1/5 of carbon emissions do come from housing. So it's yet another example of this authority delivering on reducing carbon in all the things we do. So without any more detail than that, I just want to very firmly second the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Dwelly. Currently, no one has indicated to come in on this item. So just pausing again. Councillor Rich, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. Thank you also to excuse me. Thank you also to Councillor Mitchell for reading out that report. I personally really welcome it. I think that's really good. I think we're doing above and beyond when it comes to. Sorry, can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes. We're making great strides with social rent, council houses, etc., which is really important, obviously, because Cornwall has got its own significant share of housing problems. Just a question really to Councillor Mitchell. He said something about Cornwall could do more with social housing or council housing or something along those lines, which I absolutely agree with. But my question really is that at the moment, if a family is in private rent or private rented accommodation, and they are faced with eviction, which sadly is happening a lot at the moment. One estate agent told me the other day that he's regularly getting over 150 applicants per property that goes on the rental market. And I know it's not Cornwall Council's remit, what it is to a certain degree, private sector. So I'm not blaming Cornwall Council for this problem, but is it really, how can a family afford to pay £580 a week to Cornwall Council to be housed in emergency accommodation? I know some families might be able to claim housing benefits, but some aren't, for example, where both parents are working. And that is something that's happening. And £580 a week is what is the figure I've been given by officers in Cornwall Council for emergency housing. And I can't imagine anybody being able to stump up that kind of money.
Thank you, Councillor Rich. So not directly related to the social side of housing, but obviously part of that pressure on housing, that impacts on the need for social housing. So I'm going to take a couple more, take a group of three, and then come back to Councillor Mitchell for response. So Councillor Harris and then Councillor May. Councillor Harris, please.
Thank you, Leader. Mine's a very small, maybe picky question. In the business plan at paragraph 93 on page 631, there's a very short reference to it is likely that an additional £600,000 is required to effectively remodel Polruan, in addition to the 1.2 million already identified in the business plan. I can't actually find the 1.2 million identified, but is this a case of us underestimating the cost of something or changing our minds halfway through? You know, I mean, a 50% increase in the cost of anything, just dealt with in a throwaway line, one would have thought there could be perhaps a bit more comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor May, please. Was I on mute then? Councillor May.
Thank you, Leader.
Sorry, thank you.
The portfolio holder mentioned in his address about voids, and you know, there are 600 or 700 voids out there. That could be more than that number, and a lot of us will have those voids in our area. I know what he's saying about workers, you know, not being able to go in, and obviously maybe only 2 workers working on a void house. But with the third lockdown now, voids will have gone up again. And I am concerned that, you know, I've got a family with 5 children. One of the children has gone now to the mother, so she can now bid on 3 or 4 beds. But, you know, I think it's really upsetting that, you know, voids are there and they could be filled with a family, but it's all taking so long. And I just want some reassurance from the portfolio holder that he will put his strength and all what he can behind voids and just see if we can accelerate the voids into getting done more quickly. But, you know, his report is good. The 17 acquisitions in May is fantastic. Not sure if they're new acquisitions or the older style council house homes, which will need a lot doing to them, but that has to be applauded. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor May. So, Councillor Mitchell, if you can take those three, and then we'll come to Councillor Monk and any others that indicate them.
Sure, thank you, Leader, and thank you to colleagues for those questions. So, with Loix, he has raised that case with me, and I certainly won't discuss it here in public. But you're absolutely right. I don't see how any Cornish family can pay prices like that on a weekly basis. I know it's bad enough here in St Ives for trying to rent somewhere, and it sounds like things are getting even worse in Truro. And I've asked for a full report on what intel the council does have and CHL relating to lets. You know, the figure of an estate agent telling you that 150 people are applying, and I think you also told me in your email that most of that, or a lot of those, are certainly from out of county. Just goes to show you the pressures that the housing market here in Cornwall is under, and it has actually most definitely got worse under COVID. So I will answer your bit about the social housing numbers. As Councillor Dwelly said, and thank you for those words, you know, we've stepped back in after 40 years of being absent to actually either directly building or procuring homes which are going into the HRA as social affordable rent. I think that's fantastic. I think we have catch up to do. We've started the ball rolling, but as you say, that commitment to be delivering 1,700 social homes shows a huge significant increase, and to be perfectly honest, really maxes out the work that we can do within the housing team with the resources and staffing levels we currently have. I certainly want to see us go beyond that, and I think the council in the next administration should really concentrate on providing social, you know, what anybody would call point at and say that's an old style council house, and I'd like to see that happen across the whole of Cornwall, not just in mid and east Cornwall where CHL operate, because those district councils in those areas didn't sell off their housing stock. Councillor Harris, thank you for your question. I have to say I'm not 100% up on what the extra £600 for the Polruan site in the business plan is, so I will find out and I will get back to you with an email as to say the cost for those additional 600,000. And Councillor May, thank you very much for all the work that you and our other two board members do. I know you, all of you, raise concerns, work on behalf of the residents and of the company, and I totally agree with you. I will be pushing to get voids filled as quickly as possible. Having a property, and even more so gut-wrenchingly one that we own, ultimately empty for longer than it needs to be, is no good for anybody. It's no good for the family that could be in that property, and let's be honest, it's no good for the company in losing the rent that it could be collecting. So I do believe everybody is certainly on board in getting our voids refilled with a Cornish family as soon as possible, and I will be giving that my full support.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd Owen, I think, is with us, our Service Director for Housing. Are you able to answer that question in relation to Polruan, or will we provide a written answer?
Yes, thank you, Leader. So the additional provision for the works at Polruan are following some further detailed work on the extent of refurbishment required to bring the hostel up to a good standard. So that's the reason for the additional allowance.
Thank you. So Councillor Monk is next, and I haven't seen anyone else indicate. Councillor Monk.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just firstly like to agree with Councillor Mitchell that I also believe that the provision of social housing, or what you would call council housing, should be a major priority for this administration and the remaining time it's in, and any future administration as well. I just wanted to reiterate that. My question to Andrew is on page 582, 2.13, carbon neutrality. It's estimated that about £125 million is going to be needed to be spent on retrofitting and introducing renewable technologies to our council properties. However, of that amount, only 25% of it will be grant funded, which leaves a £80–90 million strain on the budget. And I just wondered a couple of things really. One of them is any provision being made for that £80–90 million provision to get carbon neutrality from the properties, and has any thought been made into actually whether to work out whether it would actually be cheaper to actually replace these properties with sort of more modern build properties rather than to keep trying to expensively retrofit them? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mould, I've not seen you indicate, but you've come onto my screen a couple of times. Did you have a question?
Sorry, Leader, no, I've been trying to get into the meeting and I finally arrived. Thank you.
Excellent. Good to see you. Thank you. So, Councillor Mitchell, if you'd like to respond to Councillor Monk, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Monk. And I know that we do both agree on providing extra social housing across the whole of Cornwall, which is encouraging, hopefully for everybody. So the extra 80 million, and you're absolutely right. I think it's been worked out as a worst case scenario that we would only achieve 25% from government grant funding. We are hoping to get as much as possible, as you would expect, and we have been quite successful in our bids for current pilot schemes. So we are hoping that that's a minimum starting point. The business cases are being worked on. To be perfectly honest, it is an ambition. It has gone in the HR, or is going into the HRA, and how that will be achieved money-wise. You know, we're taking full advantage of the borrowing cap that was removed only just recently, and you're absolutely right. There is a question. Our housing stock in some areas is quite old. It is just sort of post Second World War, but we will be looking at whether knocking down houses and building new ones is a financially sustainable route forward. Initial figures would say that it's not. It is retrofitting that is the best way forward. Government, I think, also agrees with that line, but it also does give you some idea. We own and operate roughly 10,500 homes. We believe it's going to cost 125 million, and it's absolutely right that we lead the way. But that leaves about, I don't know, 320,000 other homes in Cornwall, which are owned by either other housing associations or personally owned by individuals. And it's also how not only do we look after what we own, but how we lead Cornwall in retrofitting other housing. But we must make also sure that through the planning system, any new builds not only meet the current requirements, but are actually future-proofed for the next sort of 20–30 years beyond that. And that is what we're certainly trying to do with our own Cornish pattern book and properties, which we will be delivering and building ourselves through the Housing Development Programme and the HRA. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So, Democratic Services Officer, we've had the recommendations proposed and seconded. If you can take vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Thorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
Thank you. And Councillor Rob Rotchell.
For.
Thank you. I can confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So, agenda item number 14 next, the Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry 2021 to 22 revenue estimates and capital programme. Councillor Brown to introduce, please.
Thank you, Leader. And before I introduce it, I'd just like to take this opportunity to apologise to any travellers who were inconvenienced by the breakdown of the liner ferry mid-river due to a generator problem recently. I'd also like to praise the work of the staff who engaged the tug to move the ferry safely to the shore to enable passengers to disembark. A full repair was effected within a couple of days and the ferry is now back in full service. But in addition, the electrical installations on the other ferries have also been checked and found to be working well. Now to move to the issue in hand, the Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry Revenue Estimates and Capital Programme 21-22. As you know, the Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry are operated, maintained and improved jointly by Cornwall Council and Plymouth City Council on a user pays principle, being funded by toll income using powers derived from the Tamar Bridge Act. The finances of the joint undertaking are effectively ring-fenced by the Act and it's operated as a self-financing business. The Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry Joint Committee terms of reference require the cabinets of the joint authorities to recommend the annual Tamar Bridge Tor Point Ferry budget to the respective full councils. As you can imagine, the budget this year has been very demanding. Toll income has been heavily affected by COVID-19, but central government support for loss of income has partially offset that impact, avoiding the need for imminent toll increases and offering some breathing space to determine a way forward. Lockdown 3 was not anticipated at the time that the Tamar Bridge Joint Committee met on the 18th of December. Its effect on traffic have been less than in Lockdown 1, in the region of 60%, and will be partially offset again by government support, at least until June 2021. The budgets assume that traffic from April 21 will be at 90% of the pre-COVID levels, although with lockdown and possible release of lockdown and staycations this year, that is at best a best estimate. Based on this assumption, the financial position of the joint undertaking is predicted to run into deficit in summer 2023. The Joint Committee will consider a range of options to address this position when they meet in March. The priority is to secure additional funding from the Department for Transport and Highways England, support the maintenance and operational costs of providing a major suspension bridge that connects the A38 trunk road between South East Cornwall and Plymouth. Traffic levels and income are closely monitored, and the Joint Committee will continue to monitor and review the financial position, alongside progress in the negotiations with the Department for Transport Highways England on future contributions. Any option to raise income from tolls needs to factor in approximately 15 to 18 months lead time for the statutory process which is required under the Act. It should be noted that both parent authorities will continue to jointly pursue financial support for the Tamar Bridge and from the Department for Transport and Highways England. The proposed budgets support the Tamar Bridge Tor Point Ferry Strategic Plan 2018 to 2022 and its annual plan. The proposed revenue expenditure and capital works items are essential to preserve the integrity of the assets and deliver the service sustainability into the future. Plymouth City Council have already approved the Joint Committee's proposals at their Cabinet meeting on the 25th of January 2021. And I'll read the recommendations. The recommendations are from Cabinet to full Council. 1, that the proposed Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry 2021-22 Revenue and Capital Programme as set out in Appendix 2 to the report be approved. 2, that the longer term revenue forecast to 23-24 be noted. And 3, that it is noted that the joint chairs of Tamar Bridge and Tor Point Ferry Joint Committee continue to press the government to deliver on its offer for Highways England to contribute towards the operation and maintenance of the Tamar Bridge. And I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Mitchell to second, please.
Thank you, Leader. This is a regular annual report confirming the Tamar budgets and capital programme for coming years. The immediate financial pressures resulting from COVID related loss of income in this financial year have been addressed by central government compensation scheme that is set to run until June this year. However, if traffic levels remain at or below 90% predicted post-pandemic, there will be significant future financial pressures on the joint undertaking, forecasted to go into deficit from summer 2023 onwards. The authorities are seeking a regular contribution from the Department for Transport and Highways England in recognition of the role that the bridge plays joining the A38 trunk road network. Any future increase in tolls, as Councillor Brown said, requires a 15 to 18 month lead-in time due to statutory process. So a clear position on this issue needs to be reached sooner rather than later. And our Tamar Joint Committee will be considering this at their next meeting in March. And as Councillor Brown also stated, Plymouth provided their parallel approvals at their Cabinet and full Council meetings last month. So I'm happy to second the proposals as read out by Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So I'm looking for an X in the box from colleagues. Anyone wanting to come in on this, please? Councillor Desmond first. Thank you, Councillor Desmond.
Thank you, Leader. My question relates to the allocation of costs in paragraph 6.9 for parapet works provisional 2 million. I don't want to go on too long about it. Suffice to say that there was originally a proposed budget of 6 million, and when I spoke to Councillor Brown about this, he kindly forwarded me on an email back in March 2019 to confirm that the £6 million proposed for the parapet works had been accurately assessed by an experienced contractor. So my question really is, what's changed?
Thank you. No one else has indicated to come in, so we'll move back to Councillor Brown to respond. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond, for your question. I will get back to you with full details, but basically the work was provisional around the parapet works, and we are still looking at what additional works are required on the parapets to improve the impact of antisocial behaviour on residents who are living below the parapets. That's an ongoing piece of work, so I will get back to you with more detail, probably after the meeting in March when we will discuss it further.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. No one else has indicated, so Democratic Services Officer, if we can take the vote, please.
Thank you, Leader. I'll take the vote by roll call. Please confirm whether you vote for, against or abstain from the proposal. Councillor Jeff Brown.
For.
Councillor Tim Dwelly.
For.
Councillor Mike Eathorne-Gibbons.
For.
Councillor Julian German.
For.
Councillor Edwina Hannaford.
For.
Councillor Sally Hawken.
For.
Councillor Andrew Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Rob Nolan.
For.
Councillor Adam Painter.
For.
And Councillor Rob Rottrell.
For.
Thank you. I can confirm that all members have voted unanimously for the recommendations. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you. So moving on then to agenda item number 15, the Council Business Plan 2018 to 2022, Budget 2021 and 22, and the Medium Term Financial Plan 2021 to 2025. Councillor Painter to introduce, please.
Thank you very much, Leader, and I do apologise for the length of my speech and introduction, but it will become apparent there have been a few changes and we will work our way through it, so please do bear with me, members. So this report sets out the Cabinet's update to the Council's business plan, the final budget recommendations for 21-22 and the medium-term financial plan for the next 4 years. This has been an extraordinary year in which to develop a budget, which has been against a backdrop of a global pandemic. It's not the budget that we had planned as the fourth budget of this administration. The long-term financial impacts to the council of the pandemic are unknown, but there is likely to be an accelerated number of people requiring our care in the future, not only older adults, but also vulnerable and homeless younger people. In addition, there are longer-term financial uncertainties produced as a result of further delays to the government's fair funding review and a one-year only spending review, which has provided an extremely challenging environment in which to set our medium-term financial plan for the next 4 years and to give some stability in an otherwise uncertain environment. Nationally, councils have lost 15 billion in core government funding between 2010 and 2020. The pandemic has only made matters worse, as councils are now battling a double whammy of a decline in revenue streams, ranging from lost business rates to a fall in payments such as parking charges and fines. The Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy Chief Executive Rob Whiteman has revealed that 12 English councils are in discussions with government in or around a Section 114 position, which means they're close to bankruptcy. 6 have agreed terms to allow capital funds to be used for day-to-day spending in order to prevent them entering a Section 114 notice. Mr. Whiteman told the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee, I think personally that there are more than 12 and that they are the tip of the iceberg. Fortunately, Cornwall Council is not one of these councils due to very careful management of Cornwall's finances by the independent Lib Dem administrations over the last 8 years. In a normal year, this council provides homes for those in need, helps educate your children, looks after your parks, beaches and open spaces, keeps your streets clean and roads moving, helps you stay healthy, collects and recycles your waste, and provides care for the vulnerable and older people in your lives. This year, in addition, Cornwall Council staff have also delivered food parcels to those shielding and those in need, sourced personal protective equipment for our key workers, paid out over 340 million of support grants to local businesses. Only yesterday, we paid out over 1.3 million to 187 businesses who haven't previously had grant support through the additional restrictions grant. We communicated with you, our residents, enforced the ever-changing social restrictions, helped our high streets and visitor economy reopen safely, set up an enhanced contact tracing service, which is now being replicated in other places, and help support school children to work at home by making IT kit available for those who do not have access to it. All of our efforts have saved countless lives and livelihoods across Cornwall. Despite ever-growing pressures on our finances, Cornwall Council remains committed to resourcing the priorities that residents have told us matter most to them, and we are determined to protect frontline services, support vulnerable people through the challenges ahead, and invest in our local economy to create good jobs for people as businesses and high streets recover from the impact of COVID. The draft budget proposals and spending priorities were formally consulted on with residents and businesses from the 18th of September to the 14th of December 2020. The budget proposals have also been presented to and considered by all of the overview and scrutiny committees in October and January. Residents and partners who took part in our consultation on the budget were able to tell us what issues really matter to them. These included more affordable, decent homes, good schools and safeguarding of our children, better job prospects and wages, decent care for the vulnerable and elderly, tackling the climate emergency, improving public transport, creating walking and cycling networks, and repairing roads and pavements. This budget tackles these issues. So on to council tax. The budget presented to you today proposes a 4.99% increase to council tax in 2021-22, which includes the government's 3% precept specifically for adult social care, as we were clearly told by the Minister that local people need to share the pain of paying more for social care. The overall 4.99% increase is within the limit set by government without triggering the need for a referendum. For subsequent years of the medium-term financial plan, council tax increases have been assumed at an increase of 1.99% each year. Cornwall Council's tax rates are currently below the England average and one of the lowest in the South West. All other upper tier South West councils are proposing to levy the government's extra 3% for social care. The decision to increase council tax has not been made lightly, and we have listened to people's concerns over rising bills and especially heard you talk about the impact on lower income families. In order, therefore, to support low income households, we are making £3 million available this year to assist households claiming council tax support. I'd like to thank Councillor Armand-Toms for suggesting this fund. The final budget proposals will see the council invest an extra £16 million a year to sustain social care services for vulnerable and older adults, on top of the £20 million uplift from last year. Ensure children get the best start in life, investing a further £6 million a year into our Ofsted outstanding services for children, schools and families. This is in addition to the £5.6 million uplift agreed last year. Invest in a new waste service to encourage every resident to recycle more. Make available almost £500,000 in 2021-22 to provide free school meals during the Easter holidays, supporting low-income families. This is being funded through additional savings released through a review of members' allowances. The budget does include measures to make a further £33 million worth of savings over the next 4 years, of which £18 million will be required in 21-22 to meet a balanced budget position. However, with a cumulative budget gap of £27 million by 2024-25, further savings will need to be made. Overall, we need to reduce our spending by £60 million to achieve a balanced budget over the period of the medium-term financial plan. Turning to the capital programme. The overall capital programme now amounts to around £1.3 billion and provides significant investment, including more than £239 million to provide decent homes for local people and remaining one of the top councils in the country for providing affordable homes. Indeed, #1 over last year. Over £180 million in connecting Cornwall with superfast broadband, better roads and more safe spaces for walking and cycling. Giving children the best start in life with more than £49 million to repair school buildings and create more school places for children across Cornwall. Leading the fight against the climate emergency with more than £18 million set aside for renewable energy and our climate action plan, including planting a forest for Cornwall, retrofitting homes to improve energy efficiency and installing electric vehicle charging points across Cornwall. In line with prudential guidance, the Council must now approve annually the capital strategy as detailed in Appendix 4, alongside the budget and Treasury strategy at Appendix 3. It sets out how capital expenditure and investment decisions are made. Appendix 3 is the Council's Treasury management strategy, which has been updated to reflect the use of short-term borrowing to take advantage of the extremely low short-term rates, and to provide a level of flexibility around the Council's borrowing to align with the investment programme. On consultation, this budget was also subject of consultation with residents, stakeholders and businesses, building on the extensive engagement we undertook in previous years and over the summer. The consultation was widely promoted. We have reached at least 150,000 people through our residents' email, our website, our social media channels, but also ensured the consultation was promoted to and accessible for non-digital audiences. We received 559 responses to our consultation survey, which was available online and as a hard copy. Feedback suggests many people support the Council's approach to reducing the budget by focusing first on changing how the Council operates and reducing the size of the organisation. They see opportunities for reducing our running costs, including in ways that help reduce our carbon footprint. They want more digital services, and they encourage us to work more closely with our communities, businesses and voluntary sector organisations to achieve outcomes for residents, in particular those most in need of help and support. Perhaps unsurprisingly, after a year like this one, the services considered most important by survey respondents included services for those most in need of help and support, such as social care services, affordable housing provision and mental health services. Half of the respondents agreed with the proposal to increase council tax by the maximum allowed by government. That's more than in previous years. However, it should be noted that the budget proposals for consultation were drafted on the assumption that the government's special levy for adult social care precept would not be available this year. So the response needs to be considered in that context. If we'd asked them if they agree with the increase on top of a 3% adult social care precept, the response may well have been different. As our committee, which oversees health and care, has highlighted, despite many years of promised funding reform for adult social care, the majority of the burden continues to fall on local authorities and their local council taxpayers, with additional precept on council tax every year since 2016. The consultation feedback shows people are concerned about increasing council tax at a time when many in Cornwall are struggling financially, including due to the impacts of COVID-19. This is a time when caring for the most vulnerable in our communities is more important than ever, yet when so many have seen their livelihoods suffer and can least afford another levy on their council tax bills. We have written to government urging them to bring forward the long-term sustainable funding package for social care in the March budget and honour the Prime Minister's pledge to fix social care once and for all. As things stand, not making use of the government's adult social care precept is not an option, but it is a choice we make with a very heavy heart. In the main report, you'll see a reference to potential changes that may need to be made as a result of the final notification of the finance settlement figures from government. We have, since this budget report was published, received the final local government finance settlement, which was released on the 4th of February. Within this announcement, a single figure for our funding linked to highways capital grants has changed, which requires me to make an amendment to the budget proposed today. The single change has arisen because the government have created a new pothole fund, which has led to the Department for Transport to reduce the overall allocation of the highways capital grant. For Cornwall, this is £6.288 million. The changes to our numbers in the budget are complicated because we receive our highways capital grant through the business rates retention pilot funding regime, which has meant an adjustment downwards because of the creation of the new pothole fund. As a consequence, we need to make a series of adjustments to the technical budget tables that sit behind all our numbers, with the impact being a reduction to our net revenue budget, which is now 6.288 million lower than originally proposed. Whilst the adjustment itself creates large volumes of changes, there is no impact on our council tax requirement because the movement relates to a capital grant. The capital programme has also therefore been adjusted by the same amount. We have not yet received confirmation of our pothole fund allocation by the Department of Transport. However, once we've had that notification, we will uplift the capital programme accordingly. In addition to this adjustment, a further 6.774 million has been removed from the capital programme, which had been allocated against the Pydar Street regeneration project, which has now been withdrawn from this agenda. I will need to propose a slightly amended set of recommendations, which will be reflected in full in the budget presented to Council later in the month. I'll now hand over to Ellie Wilcox, Head of Financial Strategy and Insight, to talk you through the changes in order that you have the right information to make a decision on the budget today. Chairman, are you happy to bring in Ellie Wilcox?
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wilcox.
Thank you, Leader. I'm just going to share a document, so just please bear with me when I load it up.
I'm sure it's making its way to our screens. Sometimes it takes a few seconds to come up, isn't it?
Is that now shared?
Yeah. Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Deputy Leader has just said, the final local government settlement was announced on Thursday the 4th of February, and we received confirmation on Friday the 5th of February from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government that the reduction to our settlement funding assessment, which is our share of business rates and revenue support grant, is lower, was due to the Department for Transport's change in allocating highways maintenance capital grants due to the creation of the pothole fund. Cornwall is only one of 3 local authorities where this change has impacted, and this is due to the inclusion of this grant within our retained business rates pilot. I'm going to take you through all of the changes that are required to the detailed appendices. Where I have not referred to an appendix, there are no changes required from the published versions. And all changes are highlighted in yellow on the paper that I'm sharing now. Appendix 2, the Council Budget and Medium-Term Financial Plan 2021-22 to 2024-25. Table 4, page 776. The column entitled 2021-22 and row change in top-up grant, and also the final row total government grant. Table 5, page 781. The row removal of highway maintenance grant brackets capital, and the following row change to top-up grant. Table 10, page 789, row 100% rate retention pilot roll into highways capital for the column 2021-22, and the final row total resources. Diagram 4, page 789, the dotted line entitled Highways Capital and the pink shaded area called Government Grants. Table 12, page 793, 2021-22 column and 2022-23 column, rows budget brought forward, business rate retention pilot switch, net revenue budget before reserve movements, net revenue budget, government grants, and revised MTFP funding. The section entitled Proposed Budget 2021-22 and Medium-Term Financial Plan 2021-22 to 2024-25 on page 795. The wording in the second paragraph will say slightly lower than in 2021, and the wording in the third paragraph should reference the Highways Capital Grant reducing to circa 20 million in 2021-22. Diagram 8, page 796, the dotted line and also the dark blue line. Table 13 on page 797, columns 2021-22, 2022-23, and the final column total. Rows connecting Cornwall, green and prosperous Cornwall, capital receipts and specific reserves. Table 16, page 802, the column entitled Forecast 31st of the 3rd 22, row total reserves held and capital financing reserve, and the subtotal at the towards the bottom of the table. Then Annex 1 to this appendix on page 807, the column 2021-22 and the row Highway Capital Grant rolled into Business Rates Pilot. Row Net Revenue Budget before reserve movements. Row Net Revenue Budget. Row Highway Capital Grant rolled into Business Rates Pilot, and row Total Forecast Resources. Appendix 3, the Annual Treasury Management Strategy, Section 1 on pages 826 and 827, the first table, columns 2021-22 and 2022-23, row general fund and total. The second table, 2021-22 and 2022-23 columns, rows general fund, total, capital receipts, revenue reserves and total financing, and then 2021-22, 2022-23 columns, capital programme row and total row. Section 2.4 on page 830, column 2021-22 and row general fund. The next table, 2021-22, row net revenue budget and ratio of debt to revenue. Appendix 4, capital strategy 2021-22, section 3.1 on page 865, columns 2021-22, 2022-23 and total, rows connecting Cornwall, green and prosperous Cornwall, capital receipts, specific reserves and total existing programme funding. Section 3.3 on page 865. Sorry, I just need to reshare my screen.
Yeah, thank you.
So I will repeat section 3.3 on page 865, columns 2021-22, 2022-23 and total, rows green and prosperous Cornwall and total pre-pipeline schemes. And appendix 1 on page 876, columns 2021-22, 2022-23 and total, connecting Cornwall, green and prosperous Cornwall, total existing programme, capital receipts, specific reserves and total existing programme. Page 879, column 2022-23, highways maintenance programme, total existing programme, specific reserves and total existing programme funding. And apologies, it also includes the total column of that table. Page 881, 2021-22 column and the total column, Pydar Street regeneration, total existing programme, capital receipts and total existing programme funding. And page 883, columns 2021-22, 2022-23 and total, rows green and prosperous Cornwall and total pre-pipeline schemes. Page 885, rows 2021-22, sorry, columns 2021-22 and total, rows Pydar Street regeneration, Spaceport Cornwall programme and total pre-pipeline schemes. Appendix 2, page 888, the update to the pie chart for the grants and contributions and specific reserves. Appendix 6, the cumulative impact assessment. Wording has been updated to reflect the new net budget of 601 million and the figure 5, the diagram, the second green bubble, the net budget element has been revised to 601 million. And those are all those changes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilcox. Deputy Leader, if you'd like to come back in, please.
Thank you very much, Leader, for that, and thank you, Ellie, for bringing those forward. I will just say to members that we will get all of that information emailed out to you today. I know Cabinet members were made aware of those changes. Unfortunately, it does happen quite regularly when we get the final changes to our budget come through from central government. So they are changes to the capital papers. So that will be sent round to all members, and obviously the papers will be amended, ready for full council, so we won't have to go through that again. There are changes to the recommendations, so I will read out the new recommendations shortly. But just in summary, there are of course risks within our budget and a number of uncertainties going forward, particularly around the lasting impacts of COVID-19, both in terms of demand for our services and economically. However, I am pleased that we've managed to put together a balanced budget for this extraordinary year. I've highlighted that further work needs to be undertaken to produce a robust and balanced plan for the remaining period of the MTFP that will help fund and meet our priority areas for Cornwall. So I am very happy to recommend this budget as amended, and I will take any questions, but I will first read out the amended recommendations. So they are recommendations that are going on to Council. That the proposed refresh of the Council's business plan 2018-22 at Appendix 1 to the report, which continues our commitment to the strategic priorities for Cornwall that residents have told us matter most to them, be approved. That the proposed 2021-22 budget and the 2021-25 medium-term financial plan at Appendix 2, as amended to the report, be approved to provide the financial resources to maintain strong delivery against the business plan, and that the cumulative impact assessment of these proposals at Appendix 6 to the report and the results of the public consultation in Appendix 5 to the report be noted. That the council tax requirement for the council's own purposes be set at 326.531 million, and it be confirmed that the Cornwall Council element of the council tax be increased by 1.99%, plus a levy of 3% to be spent solely on adult social care for the financial year 2021-22, an overall increase of 4.99%, equivalent to a Band D charge of £1,667.26. The indicative future increases in council tax and subject to changes in council tax limiting principles and future budget requirements are agreed for budget planning purposes at 1.99% for the financial years 2022-23 to 2024-25. That a net general fund budget for 2021-22 of 600.577 million be set. That the Chief Executive and Strategic Directors be required to meet the revenue budget targets as set out in Appendix 2 as amended to the report. For the delivery of council services in 2021-22 and future years to 2024-25 as set within the council's medium-term financial plan. That consideration be given to the Section 151 Officer Report on the level of General Fund Reserve, and approval be given to transfer the forecast closing of 2020-21 balances of the reserves identified in Appendix 2 to the report into the General Fund Reserve. That the Treasury Annual Management Strategy 2021-22 as set out in Appendix 3 as amended to the report be approved, including the Prudential Indicators and Treasury Indicators 2021-22 to 2023-24 as detailed in Section 2 and 4 of Appendix 3. The Annual Investment Strategy 2021-22 as detailed in Section 5 of Appendix 3. The Minimum Revenue Provision Policy 2021-22 as detailed in Section 2.3 of Appendix 3. That the Annual Capital Strategy 2021-22 as set out in Appendix 4 as amended to the report be approved. That the revised capital programme as detailed within the report as amended by the removal of 6.288 million for highways maintenance programme and the 6.774 million for the Pydar Street regeneration be approved. Thank you very much, Leader. And could I just finish by saying thank you very much to all members, members of the public, our businesses, and all the members of our finance team who have worked extremely hard in this very, very challenging year to be able to bring this budget together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so, colleagues, this is the decision of Cabinet Committee, which is going on to full council. So, as has been said, you'll receive all of those changes, but you'll also receive the full council papers. So obviously all of those will be reflective of these changes. So I appreciate it's not ideal having those changes out this way, but we've put them up, albeit briefly, so that people can see what Cabinet is considering. But to reiterate, it is Cabinet's consideration. Given that we've had to take much longer than we would normally on the presentation, I'm going to be very brief in seconding. I was going to talk to the business plan, and I think from Cabinet colleagues' point of view, probably best to leave your comments on this until we get to full council. Obviously happy though to take questions and from the wider membership, and for Cabinet colleagues to come in and answer those as appropriate alongside myself and Councillor Painter. So with regards to the business plan, I'm sure it'll be familiar to all of you, really setting out our values, our priorities and aims, and I've already talked about those earlier today. Someone's still sharing their screen, I'm afraid. It might be Councillor Brown, but I'm not entirely sure, so if you can unshare, thank you. So I'm going to go then to the wider membership. I'm going to bring in Councillor Buscombe first as chair of the scrutiny committee that has the breadth of the budget, and then go to Councillor Harris and Desmond and work our way down the list in groups of 3. So Councillor Buscombe, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. I'd just like to say that I think all members have had various opportunities to be part of this budget forming process this year. I think we've had excellent dialogue. We've had scrutiny meetings, we've had joint scrutiny meetings, all member briefings, and I believe there have been party political briefings as well. So I don't think any member could say that they've been unaware of the process this year. We've had excellent involvement at scrutiny level. I would like to echo the comments of Councillor Painter to say that Tracy Langley and her team have done an excellent job under incredibly difficult circumstances, and I think it's been an excellent example of how in Cornwall we can all work together for the common good. So I'd just like to leave it there, but just to say that I think we've done an excellent job, and there will be a sort of wash up of the budget process this year, where all members will be asked for their comments of what went well and what we think can be improved in the future. And there'll be a joint scrutiny committee meeting, I think on the 12th of April, where we will consider all members' views, because we want to build on this excellent process, for the next council and the next set of members that come along after May the 3rd this year. So thank you very much, Chairman, for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Buscombe. Councillor Harris next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Never mind congratulating Tracy Langley, etc., all of whom need congratulating. The biggest congratulations go to Ellie for going through those amendments in such detail. The budget, of course, is coming to Council for full review and debate later on. So I wonder if I might ask a question on a fairly narrow point at this time. The Paragraph Street development has, of course, been removed from the agenda following the debacle at planning last week when the outline planning application was refused. Logically, there'll be a lot of costs, consultants, etc., associated with preparing that application. I think the consultants on this were in 2019-20 were £1.3 million alone, all of which costs could have been added to the cost of the development and not charged to revenue if this had progressed as planned. So can I ask now, how much of these costs will now have to be written off, and more to the point, whether the figures we have today should be adjusted to allow for whatever number this is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Desmond, please.
Thank you, Leader. I can imagine there's going to be quite a few complications here for you to get through with the questions that are going to be asked. And as you say, there will be a much more in-depth opportunity to go through this in detail at full council. But in the interim, I'd be grateful to have some help on the capital strategy with the following questions. On pages 863 and 868, there are a number of points there that I'd like some help with. On page 868, paragraph 5.5, there is reference to generating capital receipts of £50 million per annum, but there is no indication as to where this comes from. Could we have some detail on this, please? On the same page at paragraph 5.3, there's a chart showing our borrowing ratio going up from 1.5 times net revenue to 2.6 times. Is this prudent? And has this been assessed in terms of what might happen to interest rates? The big fear, of course, is that they will rise. On page 731, at paragraph 4.3 of the main report, there is reference to reprofiling of the capital programme. Items there total £110 million into later years. Is this simply further evidence that we're having a real problem with the management of our programmes? And finally, I couldn't find any reference to underspend within the body of the document. And my question therefore is whether there is a reference to any underspend that's going to be carried forward. If I could leave those with you, and I appreciate that it might be a bit difficult to answer those now, but if I can have a reasonable reply, I'd be grateful, and I look forward to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Desmond. Hopefully we can give you a reasonable reply, I think, across those. Councillor Painter, if you'd like to respond. Councillor Buscom's was a statement, very welcome, thank you, and look forward to the lessons learned piece of work, but the questions from Councillor Harris and Desmond, please.
Thank you, Leader. And then, yeah, just to thank Councillor Buscom for his work across his committee, because he did, as he said, have an oversight across the whole of the budget process. And indeed, the budget process was quite different this year and was constructed differently. So I would thank him for his work and the work of the committee. Councillor Harris, yes, so on the PIDAR spend, so the spend to date on PIDAR has come from the Economic Development Match Fund, which is taken from reserves, so there's no impact on the bottom line. Clearly, we'll have to see how the PIDAR scheme develops and whether that comes back and how we treat that money going forward. So, you know, that will be done as we go forward and obviously will be accounted for when we come into the year end. Councillor Desmond, I got most of the questions you had, just going through some of the capital receipts. So yeah, the capital receipts are general capital receipts. When you talked about page 868 and 5.5 was around the sales. So the target was set around 15 million for the capital receipts target. So that is around you know, our buildings and our property and our land and how we use that and how we bring receipts back in to the council, which helps fund our capital projects. As far as being prudent, we do believe that we are being prudent with our capital spend. I think interest rates is a very interesting one. I think you know, the Bank of England and others are looking at the potential for negative interest rates. So you know, yes, we are very, very low at the moment, but you might think the only way is up, but I'm not sure that that is the case. We might end up seeing, as many other countries have gone to negative interest rates. So we'll see where we go on that. But clearly we are making sure that we are being prudent with our spending on in relation to capital. And as you say, on underspend, so it is a rolling programme which you know, rolls forwards 4 years at a time. So clearly projects, some may come forward earlier, some may be delayed. So underspends, we have to reckon that up at the end of each financial year to look at how we're doing. So that's something that we do every year and clearly adjust that at the financial outturn, which obviously we're not at yet. But that's something that around Q4 and then moving into Q1 of the next financial year, we look at the outturn and make sure that those are adjusted and addressed, and that's why the capital programme moves around, and we clearly any changes to the capital programme comes back to full council for sign off. Hopefully that's covered all the points, Councillor Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Painter. Sorry, did you pick up Councillor Harris on PIDA?
I did, just to say that it was the spend was from the Economic Development Match Fund, which was taken from the reserve, so there's no impact on the bottom line for the purposes of our budget today.
Thank you, thank you. So, sorry, just going back to the list. So it's Councillor Olivier, Taylor and Kirkham next, please. Councillor Olivier, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian. Sorry I'm not wearing a tie. I've gone for a pirate's top instead, but I'm sure you'll be all right with that. I would start by saying I was a member of the Strategic Planning Committee that took what I regard as a very perverse decision about Pydar Street. And I think I should say that it shows how far the political culture of our council has to go, that considering we've declared a climate emergency collectively as a council, perhaps the biggest argument used for refusing the Pydar Street application was that it would get rid of 12% of the parking spaces in Truro, a town that is very well served by public transport in many ways. So, it was a disappointment and a surprise to me, that decision, to reject it out of hand rather than seek deferral or further discussions on the proposals. The main matter at hand, though, I appreciate the very difficult position the council is in terms of the financial restrictions imposed by government on the one hand and the needs of our communities, the growing needs of our communities on the other. You're between a rock and a hard place, whoever the administration is. So I'm not unsympathetic to you in that respect. The specific sort of amendment or change I would like to be considered for the budget, and I will put forward a specific budget amendment if necessary, was in this financial year we had a very successful emergency food grant fund, totaling I think £658,000. The money came from the government. It was administered by Cornwall Council. Applications were made by anti-poverty, food poverty organisations like the local food banks. It was very well administered. The turnaround time for applications and grants was absolutely exceptional, unprecedented in my experience of local councils, the speed with which the money was distributed to those who applied. The decision about council, but that was a one-off. It was a one-off. That fund was provided in this financial year, this emergency food grant assistance fund. It's not in the budget for this year, as far as I can tell. That's my question. We've got emergency provision, we've got hardship funds, but a specific fund of that kind for food poverty organisations to apply to isn't there. Therefore, I would like the money that was, shall we say, unexpectedly saved from the council after the council allowances debate, which I believe was £335,000. I've contacted Ellie Wilcox about that. I believe that was the figure. I would like that put into a similar fund for the coming financial year. Again, it's a one-off sum because it was a one-off saving. We could put it into the hardship fund. I haven't been able to connect to the whole meeting, but I've been told somebody might have suggested that. But I would actually prefer us to replicate, albeit on a smaller scale, the Emergency Food Poverty Fund for organisations to apply to in the next financial year with that money. I hope that wasn't too convoluted, Chair.
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand. So Councillor Hawken has indicated, but I'll take Councillor and Taylor and Kirkham first and then pick up the questions. So Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Leader. My first question refers to page 729, where it mentions the government local tax income guarantee scheme, which is based on an estimated collection deficit, which could be up to £6 million for Cornwall. But this budget has seemed fit to do no estimate and not even made an attempt. Technical guidance was released by the government, so I'm looking forward to an answer as to why that hasn't been addressed. But my specific question, if I may, is Appendix 3 on page 7, paragraph 7 on page 856. and this was a criteria set for lending to third sector. So Councillor Harris specifically asked this question over a year ago about how we did manage to lend 200,000 to Cornwall Food Foundation, which then had to be written off, of which 100k was lent very shortly before they went bust. Can we get assurances that the proposed new system is better than the previous unexplained one? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Kirkham.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to say just a few things about the budget before we go to full council. Partly political points, really, to be honest. You will have heard our party leaders say this is a Sunak-Johnson budget, and it is. Adult social care for the last 4 years has been hoisted onto local councils to fund. They promised they wouldn't do this. They've done it again. 3% is a huge increase for people in Cornwall at this time. It is outrageous that they have not dealt with social care, that they are foisting it onto councils again. The same with COVID costs. They said they would cover them, do whatever it took, and they haven't. I'm going to use a tabloid phrase. They've passed the buck, but not the bucks. That's what's happened yet again. My question really is, in our health scrutiny meetings, we discussed things like the cuts that were due to happen to drugs and alcohol treatment services, that kind of thing. And we were discussing the possibility of sharing the costs out amongst other partners so that wouldn't happen. So I wanted to confirm that would be the case. Obviously, there are issues with adult social care. We're looking at huge savings in the next year or two, which seem very difficult, if not impossible. And I was aware that audit were looking at adult social care, some of those old invoices as well, and the processes there. It will be incredibly difficult to make those savings. So really, it's a political point, and just to confirm that some of those costs can be spread.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Councillor Hawken first on the food poverty issue, and Councillor Hawken may want to comment on the DAT costs as well, but up to her.
DAT straddles myself and Councillor Nolan, but I'm pleased with the conclusion we've come to, and I believe there's some further funding coming in, which is again new news since we last spoke about it. In terms of food poverty, I did have a few words that I was going to say about that, but was taking the leader's lead that we could perhaps spend more time talking at full council about some of these issues. But as you brought it up, Councillor Olivier, it's probably worth me sharing those thoughts now. So Councillor Painter did mention it in his overview of the budget, but I'd like to highlight in particular that late amendment, which might not be noticed by all. The Cabinet have always valued the wider membership involvement in the budget process, which we've been talking about, that's happened through scrutiny committees. So it's important to mention changes that have happened since then. So following the decision at last full council, the budget here includes 485,000 that Cabinet have identified for free school meals during the Easter holiday. You know, I've said two things consistently. We must do all we can to ensure struggling families are supported. And the government's own reports on child food poverty over at least the last 4 years have highlighted that food during school holidays is a valuable way to deliver that help. And of course, we're eternally grateful to a young footballer that this issue remains high profile. During February half term, we're supporting families using the government's winter COVID grant, which includes funding for all of those on free school meals. Pleased that there's additional government funding for holiday activities programmes for this year, with 1.6 million coming to Cornwall, and we're working up our offer on this as we speak. But it will not cover all the need across Cornwall. Child Poverty Action Group, Trussell Trust, I think close to 60 charities are calling for the £20 uplift for universal credit to be put in place, that was put in place during the pandemic, to be kept. This is currently set to end in 2 months, with 5.9 million facing uncertainty as the debates between Treasury and DWP continue on this lifeline. And the Office for Budget Responsibility doesn't expect unemployment to fall to pre-crisis levels until 2024. The uplift ending in April at the same time as furlough winds down could be devastating. I sincerely hope government hear these calls to keep the uplift, to bake into business as usual, supporting children on free school meals during school holidays, and to move away from short-term sticking plaster options on child food poverty. In the meantime, I'm grateful that the Cabinet have discussed this issue, and this budget includes funding that was originally earmarked for increasing council allowances being directed to support food for those children on free school meals during the Easter holidays. On today's figures, that's 15,500 children in primary, secondary and colleges who will benefit for the 2 weeks of the Easter holidays. I hope that goes some way, Councillor Olivier, to understanding that we're possibly on the same page on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Hawken, and Councillor Painter on Councillor Taylor's questions and anything further on Councillor Kirkham. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Councillor Kirkham, for your comments, and also Councillor Olivier. I do share some of your sentiments as far as political posturing at planning committees is very unwelcome, but I'll leave it there. Councillor Taylor, thank you for your questions. We have indeed included the tax income guarantee scheme that you referred to on page 729 within this budget. So the breakdown of those figures, as you said, it was around 6 million. So it is 6.565 million that we've included in this budget. We've used a portion of it to help balance the budget, and we've used 3 million of that to support the council tax support scheme. So that's how we've used that money. So it has been included. We've not forgotten about it. And obviously it's very useful for Cornwall, and to make sure that we've got a really good scheme for those low income families who are struggling on council tax support. On your other question around grants to external bodies, and I know we did comprehensively look into the issues around the Food Foundation and how that money, I know at the time we reported on that. We have made changes and we have looked at how that process works. So I can assure you that we did do that, and there are more checks in place now to support that. But there were some extenuating circumstances around that which were made available at the time. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And colleagues who aren't speaking, if you'd like to turn off your cameras, please. So the next three are Councillor Mould, Alvey and Rushworth. Councillor Mould, please.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you very much. Amidst all the numbers, is there any provision to write off a write-off for what GLL owe, in particular the recent loan and any other monies they owe? Given page 805, there's mention of risk provision of financial support for leisure. Just wondering if there's something I should be understanding in there. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies, I've just realised my screen moved down, so it was Monk, Mould and Alvey. So Councillor Monk, please. Apologies.
Thank you. I was furiously trying to type something into the chat bar to remind you. It's a question for the financial officer. Table 16 of the financial plan, page 802, shows reserve movements and the forecast that the general fund reserve will be about £38 million for the next few years. However, the weighted risk schedule in table 17, page 805, shows the magnitude of weighted risks at 45 million. Why is the general reserve not being maintained at this prudent level of 45 million? And if the 38 million falls below that figure, or the budget falls below that figure, we should be forcing an instant top up or stop spending. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Monk, and Councillor Alvey, please.
Thank you, Leader. On social care now, and then Appendix 2, page 41 of the report, but page 809 of the papers. It said that 2.9 million will be saved by cost avoidance, which is an interesting phrase. Please, can you confirm that this isn't just sort of sticking bills in the bottom drawer? And more pertinently, please confirm that the disgraceful details of under-accruals that were presented to the audit committee recently have actually been properly provided for in the budget now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alvey. So Councillor Painter, if you'd like to respond, please.
Certainly, thank you, Leader. So, Councillor Mould, yes, GLL, we have factored in the risks around GLL and the non-repayment of their loans. So we've made provision for that within reserves. Councillor Monk, I think you, as you said, you were asking Tracy Langley perhaps to give her assessment of risks around reserve levels. So it might be prudent to go to Tracy Langley, if you're happy in a moment, Leader, just to give her assessment on her risk levels and where she sees that. And then Councillor Alvey, certainly within the accruals, yes, obviously, accruals go forward between years for spend that we know are coming up. Clearly, we've had a few issues with accruals and some of the accounting within our adult and social care department, and that's something which officers have been working hard both across the finance area and the adult social care area to make sure they can get that right. So it's something that certainly myself and the Leader have been very insistent on, to make sure officers get that process right, because it's something that they should be doing. I know they have reported back to audit to make sure that those processes are in place, and we will be keeping on making sure that that process is happening, and we are meeting regularly to make sure that those figures are correct. And certainly they have worked very hard to look at those backlogs of assessments to make sure that we get those figures right moving forward. So I do share your concerns, and certainly it's something we're moving forward with. Thank you.
Thank you. So Ms Langley, Chief Operating Officer and Section 151 Officer, if you'd like to come in on that question around reserves and risks, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. During the year, I've been really clear that the reserves position couldn't drop below 35 million, but accept that this is an extraordinary year where we're carrying many more risks than we normally do. At the point at which I did my risk assessment before the report was published, we were carrying huge amounts of risk, and my assessment went up. But of course, I can't just take another 10 million out of all of the funds. So I am happy with the 38 million that there is in the budget today, but we'll keep an eye on the risk assessment just to make sure that we're covering those risks on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to Councillor Rushworth next, and whilst Councillor Rushworth is asking his question, it's your opportunity to get your X in the box. If there aren't any other X's in the box, then I've got three councillors who've previously come in who I'll bring back in. Councillor Rushworth, please.
Thank you, Leader. My questions are based on page 13 of Appendix 5, the business plan. My first question is, there are 3 bullet points at the bottom, which is investment 173 million, capital 431 million, and savings of 4 million. What does that mean? That's my first question. When we go on to the housing delivery, as we know, Bobbington and Tolvanen has produced 113 houses, and it says below that, with many more under construction. I'm not aware of any, maybe Magdalen Farm has started now, that there are any under construction. So could the portfolio holder tell me how many are under construction and where they are? I then just want to comment on this success measure of 1,000 homes. Well, to put it into context, half of those, around about 500, have been delivered through the PR grant programme, which is government money that is given to Cornwall Council to then pass on to help deliver affordable housing. That 500 figure has been pretty consistent through the last 2 administrations, and there's nothing in this report that acknowledges that the council have helped to provide all this, so it's not passing on the right message to the people of Cornwall. Secondly, we have we're also saying that we need 12, that we should be delivered 12,000 houses over the period, about 3,000 a year. I just want to say that housing delivery of affordable homes is down by 4.3% on the previous administration, but the delivery of open market housing is up by 17.7%. So we're not really delivering on the houses that the people of Cornwall can afford, but we are delivering on the open market houses which most people can't afford. However, I do acknowledge that a lot of local people are able to buy these houses through the government's donating and helping them to buy through the Help to Buy system. Again, that's not being acknowledged in this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rushworth. No one else has indicated, so we'll take Councillor Rushworth and then go back to the three speakers that have come in. So the first question was on the business plan. So the business plan is set out looking at the 5 key areas for us of healthy Cornwall, homes for Cornwall, green and prosperous Cornwall, connecting Cornwall and democratic Cornwall. And colleagues will see in there as Councillor Rushworth said, the investment, capital and savings lines that are in there. So those relate to these priority areas, how much we're investing, the amount of capital that we're using to deliver here, and the amount of savings so that are in those areas. So as colleagues will know, we talk about savings, we talk about efficiencies, we talk about doing things differently, and as we've all talked about, the financial challenges that we're facing, even where there's more resource going in, we still need to make savings to make sure that we're using our resources as wisely as possible. And also thank Councillor Rushworth for the opportunity to highlight that we are the #1 local authority for delivering affordable housing in the country. Councillor Painter, did you have anything to add on Councillor Rushworth's questions, comments?
I think clearly on affordable housing, we would love to be able to deliver more affordable housing through the planning process, but unfortunately central government said we weren't allowed to set our local plan targets at 40% as we had wanted. Government said we had to set it lower at only 30%. So clearly, if we were able to, we would love Councillor Rushworth to lobby government and say we would rather provide more affordable housing. Why is government stopping us doing that? So, you know, certainly I would rather a higher percentage, but clearly we have to play by the rules that that government have set. Local government. I don't know if clearly Councillor Mitchell would be able to talk further on some of the sites and the specifics, which I'm sure he can furnish those figures across with Councillor Rushworth. But as far as this council providing homes for Cornwall, it's been one of our key priorities, and we're very proud that we've supplied nearly 1,000 homes extra into Cornwall, which would not have happened without the council supporting them. You know, we've used many different schemes and ways in which we can do that, and I think that's only right, that we could use every tool in our toolbox to deliver more homes that the people need. So we'll continue to do that. We do now have a long pipeline, so part of the narrative is around, you know, not just the 1,000 homes, and I'm, you know, delighted that where I'm sat at the moment in Launceston, we will be the 1,000th home will be delivered in Launceston very shortly. So, you know, that is absolutely fantastic and amazing achievement for this council. So yes, I'm sure we can give more details of that information, but it was quite a challenge. You know, it's a huge challenge that the councils rose to basically go from almost 0 up to providing the levels that we have done to date. So, you know, the pipeline will certainly provide many more going forward, and clearly with some of the changes that we've managed to force government into as far as changes to funding, we can actually supply proper council housing and social housing, which is something that I've been very keen to do, but the mechanisms didn't allow us to do that earlier. So, you know, we're really pleased that we can do that as well. So I think it's a great story, but certainly Councillor Mitchell, if you wish to bring him in, I'm sure could give slightly more information, but I'll leave that to you, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell, did you want to add briefly? I think myself and the Deputy Leader have both covered your portfolio. If
you haven't done too bad a job between the two of you. But no, I'd like to thank Councillor Rushworth. I know he fully supports the delivery of housing and more suitable affordable housing, and with Councillor Monk within the Conservatives also supports social housing. So I have to say I'm a little disappointed that it's trying to make out that it is not a positive, good story here in Cornwall. We have been the #1 authority for the last 2 running years, and for the last 5 years in the top 3 authorities delivering affordable homes. I think the slight reduction is purely maths and reflects what's happened across the whole of the UK in the housing market with that reduction in affordable delivery. We are working well with Homes England. We are getting government grant. We are trying to deliver the right type of housing here in Cornwall for local residents, and that is actually, in my belief, more social even than affordable. We're the first, or I certainly am the first, to admit affordable is not affordable for many people on local wages here in Cornwall. So we do need to address that, and we are starting to do that. But I think you'll find we've got more investment in affordable, even if the percentage has slightly dropped as opposed to open market. And I think that also comes down to, besides the point that Adam made about the local plan and the inspector setting a lower affordable provision than we would certainly have liked to have said developers must deliver. We've also got this anomaly that financial viability out trumps everything. So, you know, we all know we've had planning committees pass developments where they promised 35–40% affordable delivery within that scheme, and within months or even a month they're back to the council saying, oh, actually we found a bit of contamination, or this doesn't work up for us, we won't make the permitted 22% profit that the government allows us to make. And it really is a shambles, and one of the best things that could possibly happen to the planning system is that is removed, that we don't allow financial viability to out trump and have us statutorily have to change our decisions. If somebody comes forward saying they're going to deliver 40% affordable on a site, if they then come back and say we can't do it, then we shouldn't let that site be developed. That's my view. But it is, I know Councillor Rushworth does know that we have done a really good job here in Cornwall, and it is something that all members of all political parties not only can be proud of, but should be proud of, and shouting that from whatever viewpoint or election leaflet that they might be printing.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. So back to Councillor Taylor, Kirkham and Olivier, please. Councillor Taylor. Are you with us, Councillor Taylor? If you're speaking, you're on mute. I'll go to Councillor Kirkham then.
This is just going to be very quick, because I've noticed that Councillor Olivier is going to come back and probably say exactly the same thing, which is that the government really needs a long-term strategy to deal with child poverty. It doesn't really need us to be plugging gaps with free school meals in holidays, and I think that was the point of the original report and what Marcus Rashford said. So hopefully by the Easter holidays the government will have come up with something more long term, and we won't need to use our hard-pressed funding because they will step into the breach. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkham. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you. Troubles with my laptop. I just want to take the opportunity to say something I am proud of, and I just want to highlight the fact that we've had increased funding from the government from 69.3 million to 83.8, and since the pandemic started we've had an extra £500 million coming to Cornwall. So what I want to say to the moaners here on this administration, when you have a budget of 5.3 million on educational services but allow 20 million to be spent on consultants, then perhaps you need to look amongst yourselves as to where sensible money is being spent and not spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I think also you need to understand the budget, and the 20 million on consultants is a fictitious figure. Councillor Olivier, please. Are you with us, Councillor?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to respond to what Sally had said. I'm happy to say that the cabinet, the administration, and this council as a whole takes the issue of food poverty in Cornwall seriously. You know, that's the fact that it voted unanimously to support the Marcus Rashford campaign to get the government to implement the recommendations of its own food poverty inquiry is evidence of that. So I'm certainly not going to point fingers at people in the council or any of its political members and say they don't care. I don't think that's true. The point I made about the specific emergency fund was that it was a huge success, channeling support to enable community-based organisations. So what I'm asking for is not for you to sort of downgrade the importance of free school meals, but to accentuate the ability of community organisations to meet the need in the communities that they know and serve. So I think as a practical proposal, it's a good idea. You know, it's been a proven success. I'm very glad. If I could just say, I think the council has got a good record about housing, as good as it's allowed to have in the current circumstances. And I'm glad to hear members of the Conservative Party pushing the case for affordable and social housing. Good for them that they're doing so. What I would like them to do is keep up the pressure on the government to redirect the £11 million a year that we're giving in as a subsidy to the owners of second homes and holiday lets, and give it to us to provide social housing. I think let's do that. Keep that up, Councillor Wiltshire. Keep that up, Councillor Monk. Keep that up, Councillor Taylor. We should keep asking for that. And while we're on the subject of sums of money, you know, I hate to sort of be the bearer of what I regard as bad news, but when we're talking about 20 million here or 69 million there, 11 million in discretionary funding for businesses affected, by the time the current wave of business grants has gone through, we will have paid out about 115 million quid to the owners of holiday let business premises in Cornwall, and 60% of that 15 million quid will have gone to the owners of properties in Cornwall who live outside of Cornwall. So I think that's an ongoing scandal. I'm mystified as to why the government has not acted to rectify the situation, and I hope the Conservative councillors keep up the pressure on that issue as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Olivier. Councillor Painter, would you like to sum up before we move to the vote? Anything further to add?
Thank you, Leader. I think it's been a good debate, and certainly we had the complexities early on in the meeting with obviously clearly some of the changes that came forward just only a few days ago. So we will get that cleared up for full council to make sure there can be a proper debate on the figures and make sure it's very clear. I will ensure that an email goes out to all members on the changes that have happened, and obviously we'll make sure that the published papers go out a week before full council and do have all the relevant changes that we've heard about today. But no, I think it's been a very good debate on what's been a very, very challenging year for everybody. And I think just to reiterate again, thank you for those councillors who never thought probably this time last year when we set last year's budget that we'd all be sat around in different rooms, many of us either in our own houses or in offices nearby, to bring the cabinet budget forward. And it looks very much like in a few weeks' time